silence, stone walls, candlelight barely flickering. But don't be fooled, midnight in a medieval monastery was no peaceful retreat. The bells never stopped ringing, the prayers stretched through the coldest hours, and your bed, a wooden plank. With a scratchy wool blanket, you were lucky. Tonight, we slip into the sandals of a monk and experience the quiet chaos of devotion, discipline, and very little sleep. If whispered tales of ancient routines and echoing halls help settle your mind, welcome home. Just subscribe now and tap the bell icon to join us for more slow walks through history's hidden corners where even monks wished for one more hour of rest. Before we continue, I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time. Is it for you right now? It's always amazing to see how far our quiet little stories are reaching. You wake to the sound of a bell cutting through the darkness like a knife through silence. The year is 1347, and you are Brother Thomas, a Benedictine monk at the Abbey of Saint Ines, just north of Paris. The stone walls around you seem to press inward with the weight of centuries, and your breath forms small clouds in the frigid air as you struggle to consciousness. It is midnight, and the bell tower above you has just announced the most dreaded moment of the monastic day, the time for vigils. Your fellow monks are stirring around you in the long, narrow dormitory. The single oil lamp at the far end of the room casts dancing shadows that make the Gothic arches seem to writhe and twist like living things. According to the rule of Saint Benedict, you and your brothers must rise at the 8th hour of the night, what we would call midnight, to perform the night office. This is not a suggestion or a gentle invitation to prayer. It is an absolute requirement that has governed monastic life for over 800 years. The dormitory itself is a masterpiece of medieval engineering designed to facilitate this very moment. Built as a single, long communal room on the first floor, it houses perhaps 40 monks, each sleeping on a simple straw mattress with a single blanket, a coverlet, and a pillow. The designers of this space understood that privacy was not merely discouraged, was seen as spiritually dangerous. Every monk must be visible to the others, accountable for his actions, even in sleep. The dormitory is patrolled throughout the night by a circator, a monk whose job it is to ensure that no one is talking, no illicit candles are burning, and no one is avoiding their spiritual obligations. You roll off your straw mattress, your joints protesting after only a few hours of rest. The medieval monastic sleep schedule followed a biphasic pattern. You went to bed after Compline, the last prayer of the day, around 9 p.m., and slept until this moment. Now you face a brutal reality that would break the will of most modern people. You must remain awake for the next hour and a half, participating in one of the most demanding prayer services of the day in a church that has no heating whatsoever. The dormitory connects directly to the church through a night stair, a narrow, winding stone staircase that allows the monks to descend directly into the choir without passing through the main body of the church. This architectural feature is both practical and symbolic. Practical because it means you don't have to go outside in the winter cold or navigate through dark corridors. Symbolic because it represents the direct connection between sleep and worship, between the horizontal rest of the body and the vertical aspiration of the soul. As you and your brothers begin to file down the night stair, the cold intensifies. The stone steps are worn smooth by centuries of midnight processions, and in winter they become treacherous with condensation that turns to ice. You grip the stone banister, feeling the cold seep through your woolen habit and into your bones. The habit itself is all you wear. Monks removed only their outer garments for sleep, sleeping in their habits, to be ready for exactly this moment, the church that awaits you is a cathedral of cold, built entirely of stone, with soaring vaulted ceilings that seem to disappear into the darkness above. It has been designed to inspire awe and humility, not comfort. The windows, magnificent during the day, with their stained glass telling stories. of saints and martyrs are now black voids that seem to suck warmth from the air. There is no heating in the church nun whatsoever. The medieval builders understood that suffering was an essential component of spiritual discipline, and they designed their sacred spaces accordingly. You take your place in the choir stalls. Wooden seats arranged in 2 rows facing each other across the central aisle. The wood is worn smooth by countless monks before you, and despite its age, it somehow seems to absorb what little body heat you possess. The service book, a massive tome bound in leather and held together with metal clasps, lies open before you. The Latin text is illuminated with gold leaf and bright colors, but in the dim light of the few candles allowed during the service, the words seem to swim and dance before your tired eyes. The vigil service itself is a marathon of prayer that would challenge even the most dedicated modern worshiper. It lasts approximately 90 minutes, during which you will chant psalms, listen to readings from Scripture and the writings of the Church Fathers, and perform complex liturgical responses that require absolute attention and precision. The chanting is done in Gregorian chant, a musical form that demands both vocal stamina and mental concentration. Your voice must blend with those of your brothers to create the ethereal harmonies that seem to transform the cold stone church into a bridge between earth and heaven. But here's what makes midnight vigils truly torturous. This is not a one-time ordeal. This happens every single night, year after year, for your entire monastic life. The rule of Saint Benedict makes no allowances for weather, illness, or exhaustion. You might be suffering from a winter cold. Your stomach might be empty from the previous day's fasting, or you might be recovering from a day of hard manual labor in the fields or workshops. None of this matters. The bell rings at midnight, and you must rise. The physical toll of this schedule is immense. Your body operates on what modern sleep researchers would recognize as a profoundly unnatural rhythm. After vigils, you return to your dormitory around 1:30 a.m., where you must somehow fall back asleep on your straw mattress, knowing that you will be roused again at 3 a.m. for lauds, another prayer service lasting about 45 minutes. Then, if you're fortunate enough to fall asleep again, you'll be awakened at 6 a.m. for prime, the first prayer of the official day. The cumulative effect of this schedule is a kind of controlled sleep deprivation that would be considered torture by modern standards. Your mind exists in a constant state of fatigue-induced vulnerability. You find yourself nodding off during the day, struggling to concentrate on your assigned tasks, and living in a perpetual twilight state between waking and sleeping. The medieval monastics understood this effect and saw it as spiritually beneficial. They believed that the weakening of the body's natural rhythms made the soul more receptive to divine influence. As you stand in the choir, chanting the ancient words in Latin, you feel the weight of this systematic exhaustion pressing down on you like a physical force. Your eyelids grow heavy, and you struggle to keep your place in the complex liturgy. The monk next to you sways slightly, and you realize he's fighting the same battle. This is the hidden torture of medieval monasticism. Not just the cold, not just the hard beds, not just the simple food, but the relentless, systematic destruction of normal human sleep patterns in service of an ideal that values spiritual discipline. Above physical comfort, the most insidious aspect of midnight vigils is how they transform time itself. In the outside world, night is a time of rest, of recovery, of peace. In the monastery, night becomes a battlefield where the soul wages war against the body's natural needs. The darkness that should bring relief instead brings obligation. The silence that should soothe instead amplifies every discomfort, every ache, every moment of doubt. Yet as you stand there in the freezing church, your voice joining with those of your brothers in the ancient chants, you begin to understand something that would be lost on most modern people. This is not merely punishment or arbitrary discipline. This is a technology of transformation, a method of breaking down the barriers between the human and the divine through the systematic application of controlled suffering. The medieval monks who designed this system understood that the ego, the sense of individual will and comfort, was the primary obstacle to spiritual enlightenment. By attacking the foundation of physical comfort, sleep, they sought to create a crack in the armor of the self through which divine grace could enter. But understanding the purpose doesn't make the experience any less grueling. As the service continues, you find yourself entering a strange, altered state that comes from the combination of extreme fatigue, cold, and the hypnotic rhythm of the chants. Your sense of time becomes distorted. Minutes feel like hours. The Latin words you've memorized so thoroughly begin to lose their meaning and become pure sound, pure rhythm, pure endurance. You are no longer Brother Thomas. You are simply a voice in the darkness, a small flame of consciousness flickering in the vast cathedral of stone and shadow. What would happen if you simply refused to get up? What if you stayed in your warm straw bed and let the others go too? Their midnight prayers. The thought crosses your mind as it has crossed the minds of countless monks before you. But the answer is both simple and terrifying. There is no escape from the monastic schedule. The circator patrolling the dormitory would notice your absence immediately. Your name would be reported to the abbot. The next morning, in the chapter house, you would face public accusation and punishment before the entire community. The shame would be overwhelming. And the physical punishment, possibly a beating administered in front of your brothers, would serve as a warning to others who might be contemplating similar rebellion. So you continue to stand, to chant, to endure. The cold seeps deeper into your bones. Your feet, in their simple leather shoes, have long since lost feeling. Your hands, clasped in prayer, are stiff and clumsy. Your breath comes in visible puffs that seem to mock the warm, comfortable sleep you've abandoned. This is midnight in a medieval monastery. Not a time of rest, but a time of trial. A nightly crucifixion of the body in service of the soul. And yet, as the service draws toward its close, you find yourself wondering what deeper mysteries await in the hours that follow. What other trials have been designed to test the limits of human endurance? The night office of vigils is just the vastal notes of the vigil service fade into the stone vaulting above you. A strange phenomenon occurs that would be utterly alien to modern experience. Rather than feeling relief that the service is over, you experience something closer to dread. The return to the dormitory means attempting to fall asleep again, knowing that in just 90 minutes, the bell will ring for lauds, and this entire ordeal will begin anew. This Bephosic sleep pattern was considered not just normal, but spiritually essential by medieval monastics, who viewed uninterrupted sleep as a form of spiritual laziness. The procession back up the night stairs is a ritual of its own. 40 monks, climbing single file through the narrow stone staircase, their habits rustling against the walls, their breathing creating a fog in the cold air. The staircase itself is a marvel of medieval engineering, steep, narrow, and perfectly designed to prevent any possibility of comfort or ease. Each step is worn smooth by centuries of midnight processions, and in winter, the condensation from so many bodies creates a treacherous slick of ice that has sent more than one monk tumbling into the darkness below. Back in the dormitory, you settle onto your straw mattress, pulling the thin blanket up to your chin. But sleep, when it comes, is not the deep restorative rest that your body craves. Instead, it's a fitful, anxious slumber, interrupted by the constant awareness that time is passing, that the next bell is approaching like an inevitable judgment. Medieval monks developed what modern sleep researchers would recognize as a form of chronic anxiety disorder, a psychological condition created by the knowledge that no sleep would ever be complete, no rest ever final. The oil lamp at the end of the dormitory continues to burn, casting its flickering light across the rows of sleeping monks. This lamp serves multiple purposes. It provides minimal light for the circator making his rounds. It serves as a beacon for monks returning from the latrine. And it acts as a constant reminder that complete darkness and complete rest are not permitted in the monastic life. Even in sleep, you are under observation, under discipline, under the watchful eye of the rule that governs every moment of your existence. The dormitory itself becomes a theater of suffering during these brief intervals between services. You can hear the restless movements of your brothers, the quiet groans of men whose bodies are protesting the unnatural schedule. Brother Marcus, who sleeps 2 mattresses to your left, has developed a persistent cough that echoes off the stone walls. Brother Augustine, elderly and frail, whispers prayers under his breath, unable to find the peace that would allow him to sleep. The sounds create a symphony of discomfort that makes your own rest even more elusive. When the bell rings for lauds at 3 a.m., the shock to your system is almost physical. Your body has barely entered the deeper stages of sleep when it's torn back to consciousness. Modern sleep research tells us that this kind of interruption is particularly damaging to both physical and mental health. But medieval monastics saw it as a necessary violence against the flesh. They understood that comfort was the enemy of spiritual progress, and they designed their schedule accordingly. The Lauds service presents its own unique challenges, taking place in the deepest part of the night. When the body's natural rhythms are at their lowest ebb, it requires monks to perform complex liturgical functions while fighting against their biology. The chanting becomes more difficult as voices crack from fatigue and cold. The Latin responses, normally automatic after years of practice, require conscious effort to remember and execute properly. Mistakes are common during lauds, and each error is noted by the cantor for later correction and possible punishment. The content of the lauds service itself seems designed to emphasize the struggle between flesh and spirit. The Psalms chosen for this hour often deal with themes of persecution, suffering, and the need for divine rescue. Out of the depths, I cry to you. O Lord becomes not just a prayer, but a literal description of the psychological state of the sleep-deprived monk. The readings from Scripture and the Church Fathers focus on the necessity of suffering for spiritual growth, the virtue of endurance, and the ultimate futility of seeking comfort in this world. As you stand in the choir stalls during lauds, you begin to understand one of the most sophisticated aspects of medieval monastic psychology. The rule of Saint Benedict doesn't simply impose suffering. It creates a system where suffering becomes meaningful, where each moment of discomfort is transformed into a stepping stone towards spiritual enlightenment. The exhaustion you feel is not just an unfortunate side effect of the schedule, it's the point. The rule explicitly states that monks should sleep until a little past the middle of the night, so that they can arise with their food fully digested, but this practical consideration is immediately subverted by the requirement to rise again for lauds. The psychological toll of this schedule becomes apparent as the weeks turn to months, and the months to years. You begin to notice changes in your thinking patterns, your emotional responses, your very sense of identity. The constant fatigue creates a kind of mental fog that makes ordinary concerns seem distant and unimportant. Worldly ambitions, personal desires, even basic physical needs begin to fade in importance compared to the immediate challenge of simply getting through the next service, the next night, the next interruption of sleep. This is where the true genius of the medieval monastic system reveals itself. By attacking the foundation of physical comfort, sleep, the rule creates a psychological state that is remarkably similar to what modern researchers call learned. The monk learns that his natural desires for rest and comfort will never be satisfied, that resistance is futile, that the only path to peace lies in complete surrender to the system. This psychological transformation is not accidental. It's the entire purpose of the monastic life. The architecture of the monastery reinforces this psychological conditioning at every turn. The night stairs that connect the dormitory to the church are not just a practical convenience, they're a physical manifestation of the direct connection between sleep and spiritual obligation. There is no escape, no neutral space, no moment when the demands of the rule are not pressing down upon you. Even in the brief intervals between services, you remain within the monastic system, subject to its discipline, shaped by its demands. As lodge draws to a close, you face perhaps the most psychologically challenging moment of the entire night. You must return to the dormitory, lie down on your straw mattress, and attempt to sleep for perhaps 2 hours before the bell rings. For prime at 6 a.m. But by now, your body and mind have been so thoroughly disrupted that normal sleep is almost impossible. You lie there in the darkness, listening to the breathing of your brothers, feeling the cold seep through your habit, and wrestling with the knowledge that this cycle will repeat itself tomorrow night, and the night after that, and every night. For the rest of your monastic life, the most insidious aspect of this schedule is how it transforms the monk's relationship with time itself. In the outside world, time is linear, progressive, leading somewhere. In the monastery, time becomes circular, repetitive, trapped in an endless cycle of prayer and suffering. The bells that ring throughout the night don't mark progress toward some goal. They mark the eternal return of the same obligations, the same discomforts, the same spiritual challenges. You begin to understand that monastic time is not about getting somewhere. It's about being transformed by the journey itself. The physical effects of this schedule are severe and cumulative. Modern studies of cloistered monks and nuns show that they often require multiple loud alarm clocks to wake up at midnight, suggesting that their natural sleep patterns have been so thoroughly disrupted that they develop abnormally high thresholds for awakening. The chronic sleep deprivation leads to a host of physical problems: weakened immune systems, digestive issues, joint pain, and a general sense of physical fragility that makes every aspect of monastic life more challenging. But perhaps the most profound effect is psychological. The constant interruption of sleep creates a state of mind that medieval mystics called spiritual wakefulness. It's a condition where the boundary between sleeping and waking becomes blurred, where dreams and reality merge, where the ordinary defenses of the ego are worn down by sheer exhaustion. In this state, monks often report profound spiritual experiences, visions, voices, a sense of divine presence that seems to fill the cold stone church during the darkest hours of the night. Whether these experiences represent genuine spiritual enlightenment or simply the hallucinations of an exhausted mind is a question that has puzzled scholars for centuries. What's clear is that the medieval monastics believed they were accessing something real and valuable through their systematic assault on normal human rhythms. They saw the suffering not as an end in itself, but as a means to an end, a way of breaking down the barriers between the human and the divine. As you lie on your straw mattress, listening to the sounds of your brothers trying to sleep, you find yourself wondering, what other torments await in the hours ahead? What other aspects of normal human life have been transformed into instruments of spiritual discipline? The night office is just one part of a vast system designed to remake human nature itself. And you're beginning to understand that midnight in a medieval monastery is not just a time of day-eds, a gateway into a completely different way of being human. The bell for prime rings at 6 a.m. And as you struggle to consciousness for the third time in 6 hours, you begin to understand the full scope of what medieval monastics called the technology of. This is not merely a schedule of prayers, a sophisticated system of psychological engineering, designed to break down the ordinary human personality and rebuild it according to a completely different set of values and priorities. The procession down the night stairs for prime has a different quality than the earlier services. By now, your body has been so thoroughly depleted that you move in a kind of trance. your feet finding the worn stone steps through muscle memory rather than conscious effort. The other monks around you display the same zombie-like quality. Their faces pale and drawn, their eyes reflecting the kind of exhaustion that goes beyond mere tiredness into something approaching physical trauma. Prime itself is mercifully shorter. Then the earlier service is only about 45 minutes, but the psychological impact is devastating. This is the moment when the monastic day officially begins, when the long night of interrupted sleep gives way to a full day of labor, study, and additional prayer services. Your body is crying out for rest, but instead you face the prospect of perhaps 16 hours of continuous activity before you'll be allowed to lie down again. The content of the prime service seems almost cruelly designed to emphasize this reality. The opening prayers speak of girding oneself for battle, of putting on the armor of God, of preparing for spiritual warfare. The Psalms chosen for this hour deal with themes of endurance, perseverance, and the need to continue fighting even when victory seems impossible. As you chant these ancient words, you realize that they're not just prayers. They're a kind of psychological programming, a way of reframing the suffering you're experiencing as something noble and meaningful. The true genius of the medieval monastic system becomes apparent when you consider the cumulative effect of months and years of this schedule. The constant sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, fundamentally alters your consciousness. Modern neuroscience tells us that chronic sleep disruption affects the brain's ability to form new memories, to regulate emotions, and to maintain a coherent sense of self. The medieval monastics didn't understand the scientific mechanisms, but they understood the practical effect. Monks who followed this schedule for years often reported profound changes in their personality, their priorities, and their understanding of reality itself. The architecture of the monastery reinforces this psychological transformation at every level. The night stairs that you've now climbed 6 times in 6 hours are not just a practical feature. They're a physical manifestation of the spiritual journey the monk is expected to undertake. Each climb represents a small death, a moment of surrender to the demands of the rule. Each descent represents a small resurrection, a return to the world of prayer and community. The stairs themselves, worn smooth by centuries of midnight processions, become a kind of holy relic, sanctified by the suffering of countless monks before you. As prime draws to a close and the first pale light of dawn begins to filter through the stained glass windows, you face a moment of profound psychological reckoning. The night office is over, but the day that stretches ahead of you will be filled with additional challenges. Manual labor that requires strength you don't possess, intellectual work that demands concentration you can't maintain, and 6 more. Prayer services that will punctuate the day with their own demands for attention and devotion. The most sophisticated aspect of this system is how it transforms the monk's relationship with his own body. In the outside world, physical discomfort is seen as a problem to be solved, a signal that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. In the monastery, physical discomfort becomes a spiritual tool, a way of accessing states of consciousness that are normally unavailable to the comfortable and well-rested. The exhaustion you feel is not an unfortunate side effect of the monastic life, it's the primary instrument of transformation. This understanding helps explain why medieval monastics often lived to remarkable ages despite the apparent harshness of their lifestyle. The constant stress of sleep deprivation, paradoxically, seems to have activated certain protective mechanisms in the body. Modern research suggests that controlled stress can actually strengthen the immune system and increase longevity, and the medieval monastics may have stumbled upon this phenomenon through their systematic assault on normal human comfort. The psychological effects of the night office extend far beyond the monastery walls. Monks who survived years of this schedule often displayed characteristics that seemed almost superhuman to their contemporaries: an ability to remain calm under extreme stress, a capacity for sustained concentration that allowed them to produce remarkable works of scholarship and art, and a kind of spiritual presence that made them natural leaders and counselors. These abilities were not innate. They were forged in the crucible of midnight prayers and interrupted sleep. The social implications of this system were profound. Medieval monasteries became centers of learning, innovation, and cultural preservation, not despite their harsh schedules, but because of them. The same psychological processes that made monks capable of enduring midnight prayers also made them capable of spending years copying manuscripts, developing new agricultural techniques, and maintaining the intellectual traditions of classical antiquity. The suffering was not separate from the achievement. It was the foundation upon which the achievement was built. As you leave the church after prime, walking through the cloister toward the refectory where a simple breakfast awaits, you begin to understand why the medieval world held monastics in such high regard. They were not simply religious professionals or spiritual athletes. They were human beings who had undergone a systematic transformation that made them capable of extraordinary things. The night office was just one component of this transformation, but it was perhaps the most important component, the foundation upon which all other aspects of monastic life were built. The breakfast itself, simple meal of bread, possibly some cheese and weak beer, takes on an almost sacramental quality when consumed by a body that has been awake for most of the night. Every bite becomes precious, every sip a moment of gratitude. The medieval monastics understood that deprivation makes appreciation possible, that comfort taken for granted has no spiritual value. By systematically denying themselves the basic human need for uninterrupted sleep, they created a psychological state in which the simplest pleasures became profound experiences. But as you sit at the long wooden table in the refectory, surrounded by your exhausted brothers, you can't help wondering what would happen if someone simply couldn't endure this schedule. What became of monks who found the night office too demanding, the sleep deprivation too severe, the whole system too harsh for human endurance? The answer to these questions lies in the shadowy corners of monastic life, in the systems of discipline and punishment that enforce the rule with an iron hand. The medieval monastery was not just a place of prayer and learning, it was a total institution, a closed system that controlled every aspect of human life. Those who entered its walls surrendered not just their worldly possessions, but their very freedom to determine their own schedule, their own priorities, their own relationship with their bodies and their needs. The night office was both the symbol and the reality of this surrender, a nightly reminder that the monk's life was no longer his own. As the sun rises over the monastery walls, casting long shadows across the stone courtyards, you realize that you've survived another night office, another trial in the endless cycle of prayer and suffering that defines monastic life. But survival is not the same as victory. The true test lies not in getting through one night, but in enduring year after year of interrupted sleep, of systematic exhaustion, of the slow, deliberate dismantling of everything that makes life comfortable and predictable. The night office has ended, but its effects will linger throughout the day. Your concentration will be impaired, your physical strength diminished, your emotional equilibrium fragile. And tonight, as surely as the sun will set, the bell will ring again at midnight, and you'll be forced to rise once more from your straw mattress, to descend the night stairs, to take your place in the choir stalls for another marathon of prayer. In the freezing darkness, this is the reality of midnight in a medieval monastery. Not just a time of worship, but a crucible of transformation. A technology of suffering that was designed to remake human nature itself. The question that haunts every monk who has endured this schedule is not whether it works. The evidence of transformation is undeniable. The question is whether the price is worth paying, whether the destruction of normal human comfort is justified by the spiritual insights it produces. And as you prepare to face another day of labor and prayer on almost no sleep, you realize that this question will follow you for the rest of your monastic life, echoing in your mind every time the midnight bell rings, every time you're forced to choose between the demands of your body and the demands of your... The year is 1203, and you are Brother Edmund, a Cistercian monk at the Abbey of Rievaulx in Yorkshire, England. Outside the monastery walls, the Yorkshire dales are locked in the grip of what chroniclers will later call one of the harshest winters. In living memory, inside the dormitory, the temperature has dropped so low that the breath of 40 sleeping monks creates a perpetual fog that hangs like a shroud over the long stone chamber. Your straw mattress, laid directly on the stone floor, has become a rectangular island of misery in an ocean of cold that seems to have its own malevolent consciousness. The dormitory at Rievaulx is a masterpiece of Cistercian architecture, which means it's designed according to principles that value spiritual discipline over human comfort. The room is a long, narrow hall with soaring stone arches that disappear into the darkness. Above the walls are built of massive Yorkshire limestone blocks, each one carefully fitted to its neighbors without mortar, creating a structure that will last for centuries, but that also acts as a perfect conductor of cold. The floor is made of the same stone, polished smooth by centuries of monastic feet. And in winter, it becomes a sheet of ice that no amount of human body heat can warm. The genius of medieval monastic architecture lies in its ability to transform every aspect of the physical environment into a tool for spiritual discipline. The dormitory has no fireplace, no chimney, no source of heat whatsoever. This is not an oversight or a sign of medieval primitiveness. It's a deliberate design choice the Cistercian reformers, in their zeal to return to the original purity of Saint Benedict's rule, explicitly rejected any form of heating in the sleeping quarters. They believed that warmth led to comfort, comfort led to complacency, and complacency led to spiritual death. The only concession to human frailty is the occasional dormitory built over the day room, where a fire burns during daylight hours. But even this minimal comfort is restricted to the daytime. At night, when the fire dies down to cold ashes, the stone floor above becomes just another conductor of cold, sucking the warmth from the bodies pressed against it. Some monks sleeping in such dormitories might benefit from residual heat, but this warmth is so minimal that it serves mainly to remind them of what they're missing rather than to provide any real comfort. Your sleeping arrangement is an exercise in medieval minimalism that would challenge the most dedicated modern ascetic. You possess a straw mattress, a single blanket, a coverlet, and a pillow. What Saint Benedict prescribed in his rule, written nearly 700 years ago. The straw mattress is perhaps 2 inches thick when new, but after months of use, it has compressed to a thin layer that provides virtually no insulation from the stone floor beneath. The blanket is made of undyed wool, coarse and scratchy, woven by the monks themselves from the fleece of their own sheep. The coverlet is even thinner, more of a symbolic gesture to ward warmth than an actual source of heat. The pillow is usually nothing more than a rolled-up piece of cloth or a small sack filled with straw. What makes this arrangement truly challenging is not just the cold, but the complete absence of privacy that would allow you to adapt to the conditions. Talking in the dormitory is forbidden, which means you can't even whisper to your neighbor about the cold. Can't share strategies for staying warm. Can't acknowledge the shared suffering that binds you all together. The rule of silence transforms the dormitory into a kind of sensory deprivation chamber where each monk must face the cold alone, wrapped in his own thoughts and prayers. The psychological effect of this isolation is profound. As you lie on your straw mattress listening to the wind howling around the stone walls, you become acutely aware of your own breathing, your own heartbeat, the subtle sounds your body makes as it tries to generate heat. The cold becomes not just a physical sensation, but a presence, a personality that seems to inhabit the dormitory and press against you with deliberate malice. you begin to understand why medieval people personified winter as a demon, a hostile force that sought to destroy human life and comfort. The stone floor beneath your mattress is the most insidious enemy of all. Stone, as any medieval builder could tell you, is an extraordinary conductor of cold. It absorbs heat from any source that touches it and radiates that heat away into the surrounding air during the day, when the sun might penetrate the high windows of the dormitory. The stone absorbs a small amount of heat, but at night, that same stone becomes a thermal vampire, drawing every bit of warmth from your body and transferring it into the vast thermal mass of the monastery's foundation. The windows of the dormitory present their own unique challenges. Built in the Cistercian style, they are narrow slits designed more for ventilation than illumination. And in winter, they become conduits for every bitter wind that sweeps across the Yorkshire moors. There is no glass in these windows' glass. It's a luxury that the reformed Cistercians have explicitly rejected as too worldly. Instead, the openings are covered with thin sheets of oiled parchment, or, in some cases, simply left open to the elements. The result is a constant flow of frigid air that circulates through the dormitory, ensuring that no corner of the room ever becomes truly warm. The layout of the dormitory reflects the Cistercian obsession with equality and surveillance. All monks sleep in the same space, regardless of their rank or years of service. The abbot, in the early years of the order, slept alongside his brothers, though by your time he has been granted the luxury of his own chamber. The arrangement means that 40 men are crammed into a space that would be considered inadequate for 20 in the outside world. Your mattress is separated from your neighbors by perhaps 2 feet of stone floor, close enough that you can hear his breathing, his quiet prayers, the subtle sounds he makes as he tries to find a position that might provide some relief from the cold. The discipline of winter sleeping in a medieval monastery requires a complete retraining of your relationship with your own body. You learn to sleep while shivering, to find rest despite the chattering of your teeth, to maintain the illusion of sleep even when your muscles are rigid with cold. You develop techniques that would seem bizarre to modern people. You learn to breathe in a way that creates a small pocket of warm air under your blanket, to position your body so that your vital organs are protected while your extremities are sacrificed to the cold, to enter a kind of hibernation state where your metabolism slows and your consciousness retreats to a warm core. Deep within your mind, the psychological dimension of cold becomes as important as the physical dimension. You begin to understand that cold is not just a sensation, it's a teacher, a spiritual director, a constant reminder of the temporary nature of all comfort and pleasure. The medieval monastics developed an elaborate theology of cold, seeing it as a purifying force that burned away attachment to worldly pleasures. They believed that just as gold is refined in fire, the soul is refined in cold, stripped of its desires for ease and comfort until only the essential spiritual core remains. The daily rhythm of the dormitory in winter becomes a cycle of endurance and brief respite. You retire to your straw mattress after Compline around 9 p.m. when the stone floor has already absorbed all the cold of the night air. The first hour is the worst, as your body heat gradually seeps into the stone beneath you, and the cold penetrates your thin blanket. Some nights, if you're fortunate, you achieve a kind of thermal equilibrium where your body generates just enough heat to maintain a tolerable temperature under your covers. But this equilibrium is fragile and temporary, easily destroyed by a shift in position or a gust of wind through the windows. The midnight bell for vigils becomes both a torture and a relief. The torture lies in being forced to leave whatever small warmth you've managed to create and expose yourself to the full force of the dormitory's cold. But there's also relief in movement, in the circulation that comes from walking in the shared warmth of 40 bodies gathered in the choir stalls. The church itself is no warmer than the dormitory, but the act of standing, walking, chanting provides a temporary respite from the passive suffering of lying still on the cold stone floor. Return to the dormitory after vigils presents a fresh horror. Your mattress, which had barely begun to warm during your first hours of sleep, has now returned to the ambient temperature of the stone floor. Climbing back under your blanket is like diving into a lake of ice. Your body, already depleted by the interrupted sleep and the energy expended during the service, has fewer resources to generate heat. The second period of sleep, between vigils and lauds, often becomes an endurance test where actual rest is impossible and survival becomes the only goal. The cumulative effect of weeks and months of winter sleeping in these conditions is profound and lasting. Your body adapts in ways that would fascinate modern physiologists. You develop an increased tolerance for cold that allows you to function in temperatures that would incapacitate most people. Your metabolism shifts to burn fuel more efficiently, creating heat from the minimal food provided by the monastery. Your circulation improves as your cardiovascular system learns to deliver warm blood to your extremities more effectively. But the psychological adaptations are even more remarkable. You learn to find peace within discomfort, to discover a kind of contentment that doesn't depend on physical pleasure. The cold becomes not an enemy to be defeated, but a companion to be acknowledged. A constant presence that teaches patience, humility, and the art of finding joy in the smallest warming brief touch of sunlight through a window. The shared warmth of brothers gathered for prayer. The simple pleasure of morning movement after a night of stillness. The social dynamics of the winter dormitory create their own complex patterns. Though talking is forbidden, a subtle communication develops among the monks. You learn to recognize the different types of shivering, the various ways bodies move in search of warmth, the quiet sounds that indicate whether a brother is managing the cold or struggling against it. A kind of solidarity emerges, a shared understanding that you're all engaged in the same battle, against the elements and the flesh. What makes this endurance particularly challenging is the knowledge that it's voluntary. Unlike soldiers or peasants who might face similar conditions through necessity, you've chosen this life, accepted these hardships as part of a spiritual path. This choice adds a psychological dimension to the physical suffering. You must constantly recommit to the decision, justify the hardship to yourself, find meaning in the misery. Some nights, as you lie shivering on your straw mattress, you wonder what madness led you to trade the warm bed of your father's house for this stone-cold penance. The architecture of the monastery reinforces the message that comfort is the enemy of spiritual progress. Every design choice, from the unheated dormitory to the stone floors to the narrow windows, reflects a deliberate rejection of anything that might make life easier or more pleasant. The builders understood that humans naturally seek comfort, and that this seeking can become a distraction from spiritual growth. By systematically removing all sources of physical ease, they created an environment where the only refuge was internal, where warmth had to be generated not by external sources, but by inner spiritual fire. As winter deepens and the Yorkshire winds grow more bitter, you begin to understand that the cold dormitory is not just a place to sleep, it's a laboratory for transformation. A place where the boundaries between body and soul are tested and redefined. The question that haunts your frozen nights is not whether you can survive this winter, but whether you can find in this suffering the spiritual insights that justify the physical 3 months into the brutal winter of 1203. You begin to discover that even within the supposedly egalitarian world of Cistercian monasticism, there exists a subtle but unmistakable hierarchy of warmth. While all monks theoretically sleep in the same dormitory, under the same conditions, the reality is far more complex, revealing how even the most austere religious communities develop systems of privilege and deprivation that mirror the inequalities of the outside world. Your position in the dormitory is not random. It's a relatively new monk with only 2 years of vows behind you. You've been assigned a sleeping spot near the center of the long stone hall, where where the winter winds create cross-currents that make warmth impossible to maintain. The senior monks, those with decades of service and proven spiritual authority, occupy the positions along the walls where the massive stone blocks provide some protection from the drafts. Brother Alred, who has served at Revo for 30 years and acts as the dormitory's unofficial patriarch, sleeps in a corner position where two walls meet, creating a natural windbreak that the younger monks regard with undisguised envy. The monastery's official position is that such arrangements are based on seniority and spiritual advancement rather than comfort. The rule of Saint Benedict makes clear that honor should be given to those who have served longest and most faithfully. But as you lie shivering in your exposed position, listening to the marginally quieter breathing of the brothers whose sleep is less disrupted by cold, you begin to understand how spiritual ideals and human nature intersect in complicated ways. The lay brothers, those monks who perform manual labor rather than participating fully in the liturgical life, have their own separate dormitory at Fountains Abbey, a sister Cistercian house not far from Revo. Up to 400 lay brothers sleep in a massive hall that dwarfs even your own dormitory. The official reason for this separation is liturgical lay. Brothers don't attend all the same services and therefore need different sleeping arrangements. But you've heard whispers that their dormitory, built later and with more practical considerations in mind, actually retains more heat than the choir monks' quarters. The irony is not lost on you. Those who work with their hands in the fields and workshops may sleep more warmly than those who spend their time in prayer and contemplation. The warming room, or calefactory, becomes the focal point of the monasteries. Complex relationship with heat and comfort. This is one of only 3 rooms in the entire monastery that has a fireplace, the others being the kitchen and the infirmary. But access to the warming room is strictly regulated according to a schedule that reflects the monastery's hierarchy as clearly as any medieval court. The abbot and prior have essentially unlimited access, using the room for administrative meetings and private consultations. The senior monks are permitted specific times for warming themselves, usually after the most demanding manual labor or before important liturgical duties. You, as a junior monk, are allowed perhaps 15 minutes. Twice a day in the warming room, once after the morning work period and once before Vespers. These brief intervals become the most precious moments of your day, more anticipated than meals, more treasured than sleep. You learn to time your approach carefully, arriving just as your allotted period begins to maximize your exposure to the fire's warmth. You develop strategies for absorbing and retaining heat, standing with your back to the flames to warm your spine, then turning to warm your chest, holding your hands close to the coals until your fingers begin to function normally. Again, the psychology of the warming room reveals the profound impact that systematic cold has on human behavior and social relationships. Brothers who are normally generous and selfless become subtly competitive about their access to heat. The conversations in the warming room have a different quality than those elsewhere in the monastery. There's an undercurrent of desperation, a shared acknowledgement that everyone is struggling with the same basic human need for warmth. Some monks develop strategies for extending their time near the fire, asking detailed questions about monastery business, volunteering for tasks that require consultation with senior brothers, finding excuses to linger that don't violate the letter of the regulations. The infirmary represents the most complex aspect of the monastery's relationship with warmth and comfort. Sick monks are permitted to sleep in heated quarters and receive additional blankets and warmer food. This medical exemption creates a category of legitimate comfort that doesn't exist anywhere else in monastic life, but it also creates temptation. You begin to notice that certain monks seem to develop mysterious ailments that require infirmary care during the coldest weeks of winter. Brother Cuthbert, a man known for his robust health during the summer months, has spent the last 3 weeks in the infirmary, with what he describes as a persistent weakness that makes him unable to tolerate the cold dormitory The infirmarian, Brother Boniface, occupies a unique position in this hierarchy of warmth. His duties include determining which monks are genuinely sick and which might be malingering. He has become expert at detecting the signs of authentic illness versus the symptoms of monks who simply can't endure another night in the frozen dormitory. His decisions about who receives the privilege of heated quarters carry enormous weight in the winter months, making him one of the most powerful figures in the monastery's informal power structure. The kitchen, as the third heated space in the monastery, develops its own social dynamics around warmth. The cooks and their assistants, who must rise before everyone else to prepare the morning meal, have legitimate reasons to spend extended time near the cooking fires. But other monks find excuses to visit the kitchen, delivering messages, seeking clarification about dietary rules, volunteering for food preparation tasks. The kitchen brothers develop a complex etiquette around sharing warmth, allowing visitors to stand near the fire for a few moments while maintaining the pretense that their visit is purely functional. Your assigned work details during winter become exercises in survival rather than spiritual discipline. When you're assigned to outdoor tasks, clearing snow from the cloister walks, maintaining the sheep in their winter quarters, gathering firewood from the monastery's forest, the contrast between the cold outside and the frozen dormitory becomes almost unbearable. At least outdoor work generates body heat through movement. But when you're assigned to the scriptorium, it's copying manuscripts in a stone room that's barely warmer than the outdoors, your hands become so cold that holding a pen becomes a form of torture. The scriptorium presents its own challenges in the hierarchy of warmth. The senior scribes, those responsible for the most valuable manuscripts, are permitted small braziers filled with charcoal to keep their ink from freezing and their parchment flexible. But junior scribes like yourself must work with cold tools on cold surfaces, producing work that suffers from the physical effects of extreme cold. Your handwriting becomes cramped and irregular as your fingers lose dexterity. The quality of your illuminations suffers as your hands shake with cold. These failures are noted by your superiors and become part of your evaluation as a monk, creating a cycle where cold leads to poor performance, which leads to lower status, which leads to less access to warmth. The monastery's approach to bathing in winter reveals another layer of the warmth hierarchy. The official position is that excessive attention to bodily cleanliness is a form of vanity. But practical necessities require some accommodation to hygiene. The senior monks are permitted warm water for washing, heated in the kitchen and brought to their cells. Junior monks must make do with cold water drawn from the well, creating a washing experience that's so unpleasant that many simply avoid it altogether, leading to the distinctive odor that pervades the winter dormitory. The clothing regulations add another dimension to the cold hierarchy. All monks wear the same basic habit, but there are subtle variations that make enormous differences. In winter comfort, the senior monks' habits are made from higher quality wool, woven more tightly and with better insulation properties. Their undergarments, while still simple, are often made from softer materials that provide better warmth retention. Your own habit, issued when you enter the monastery, is made from the coarsest wool, woven by novices learning their craft, and provides minimal protection against the penetrating cold of the Yorkshire winter. The midnight services take on a different character when viewed through the lens of the warmth hierarchy. The choir stalls, where the monks stand during prayers, are arranged according to seniority, with the most senior brothers occupying positions that offer some protection from drafts. The junior monks stand in the most exposed positions, where the cold air from the unheated nave creates constant circulation. During the long winter vigils, you find yourself not just fighting sleep and fatigue, but also battling hypothermia as your body temperature drops during the 90 minutes of standing and chanting in the frigid church. The psychological impact of this hierarchy extends far beyond simple physical discomfort. You begin to understand that warmth has become a currency in the monastery. a resource that can be earned through spiritual advancement, good behavior, and political skill. The monks who manage to stay warmer are not necessarily more holy or more dedicated, they're simply better at navigating the complex social system that governs access to heat. This realization challenges your understanding of monastic equality and forces you, to confront the gap between spiritual ideals and human reality. The food itself becomes part of the warmth hierarchy. Hot meals are prepared in the kitchen, but by the time they reach the refectory and are distributed according to the complex protocols of monastic dining, some portions are significantly warmer than others. The senior monks, served first, receive food that still steams in their bowls. By the time you receive your portion, the thin gruel and bread have cooled to barely above the ambient temperature of the stone refectory. The warmth that food provides to your core body temperature becomes as important as its nutritional value. Sleep becomes an entirely different experience when you understand your position in the warmth hierarchy. You lie on your straw mattress, acutely aware that Brother Alred in his corner position is probably sleeping soundly while you fight too. Control your shivering. The knowledge that comfort exists within the same building, separated from you only by arbitrary regulations and social status, makes the cold feel more cruel and deliberate. You begin to understand why medieval people were so preoccupied with questions of justice and fairness when survival depends on access to basic resources like warmth. Every inequality becomes a matter of life and death. The long winter nights become exercises in meditation on the nature of hierarchy and privilege. As you lie sleepless on the cold stone floor, you find yourself thinking about the warm beds of your childhood, the fires that burned in your father's house, the simple pleasure of sleeping without shivering. But you also think about the lay brothers in their separate dormitory, the servants in the monastery's outer buildings, the peasants in their unheated cottages scattered across the Yorkshire countryside. Your suffering, intense as it feels, exists within a vast spectrum of human discomfort and endurance. What becomes clear as the winter progresses is that the hierarchy of warmth serves multiple purposes within the monastic system. It provides incentives for advancement and good behavior, rewards for long service and spiritual development. But it also creates a microcosm of the outside world's inequalities, forcing monks to confront their own desires for comfort and status. The cold becomes not just a physical challenge, but a spiritual teacher, revealing the subtle ways that pride and envy can survive even within the most austere religious communities. As February arrives with its promise of eventual spring, you find yourself wondering what other hidden hierarchies exist within the seemingly egalitarian world of the monastery. What other systems of reward and punishment operate beneath the surface of monastic life? The warmth hierarchy has revealed the gap between ideal and reality in one crucial area, but surely it's not the only place where human nature complicates spiritual. By March of 1204, as the first tentative signs of spring begin to appear in the Yorkshire countryside, you have survived your first full winter in the frozen dormitory of Rievaulx Abbey. The experience has fundamentally altered not just your body, but your understanding of what it means to be human. As you lie on your straw mattress during what you now know will be one of the last truly frigid nights, you realize that the winter has taught you lessons that no amount of reading or prayer could have provided. The gradual warming that comes with spring's approach reveals the full extent of winter's assault on the monastic community. As the stone walls slowly begin to absorb and retain the lengthening daylight, the dormitory's temperature rises by degrees so small they're barely perceptible. From day to day, yet cumulatively, they represent a transformation as profound as resurrection itself. You become aware of changes in your body that you hadn't noticed during the worst of the cold. Your hands have developed a permanent tremor. Your circulation has adapted to function in conditions that would have incapacitated you months earlier. And your tolerance for discomfort has expanded to encompass experiences that would have seemed impossible before you entered monastic life. The psychological archaeology of spring reveals layers of adaptation that accumulated during the winter months. You discover that your relationship with sleep has been permanently altered by months of trying to rest on freezing stone. You've learned to sleep while shivering, to find rest despite constant discomfort, to wake refreshed even after nights when true warmth never came. These skills, forged in the crucible of winter monasticism, represent a fundamental reprogramming of your nervous system that will serve you. For the rest of your monastic life, the social dynamics of the dormitory shift subtly as warmth returns. The informal hierarchies that governed access to heat become less critical as the ambient temperature rises above the threshold of survival. Brother Alred's corner position, so enviable during the depths of winter, now seems less significant as all positions in the dormitory become tolerable. The conversations in the warming room take on a different tone as the desperate edge of winter need fades into memory. You begin to understand that the monastery's social structure adapts seasonally, reflecting the changing balance between survival and spiritual aspiration. The physical renovation of spring extends beyond mere temperature. The stone floors that served as thermal vampires throughout the winter gradually warm enough to become neutral rather than actively hostile your straw mattress. Compressed to near invisibility by months of use, begins to seem adequate again, as the cold no longer penetrates it with such vicious efficiency. The thin blanket that provided such inadequate protection against winter's assault now seems almost sufficient for sleep. The liturgical calendar reflects this seasonal transformation in ways that speak to centuries of monastic experience with the rhythm of cold and warmth. The prayers and readings chosen for late winter and early spring deal explicitly with themes of endurance rewarded, suffering transformed into wisdom, and the spiritual significance of surviving trials that test the limits of human capacity. The midnight services, which seemed like instruments of torture during the deepest cold, begin to feel more like opportunities for prayer as the church itself becomes less of an Arctic wasteland. Your work assignments change with the season, reflecting both practical necessities and the monastery's understanding of how winter transforms the human capacity for labor. The outdoor tasks that were nearly impossible during the depths of winter, tending the sheep, maintaining the monastery's extensive agricultural operations, gathering materials from the surrounding countryside, gradually become manageable again. But you discover that your winter experience has changed your approach to all work. Tasks that seemed difficult before your winter trial now appear almost easy. Your tolerance for discomfort has expanded to encompass a much wider range of experiences. The scriptorium work reveals the most subtle, but perhaps most important transformation wrought by your winter experience. Your handwriting, which became cramped and irregular during the coldest months, gradually improves as your hands regain their flexibility. But more significantly, your attitude toward the work itself has changed. The patient concentration required for copying manuscripts, which once seemed like a burden, now feels almost luxurious compared to the simple struggle for warmth that dominated your winter nights. You've learned to find satisfaction in work that doesn't depend on external comfort, to discover fulfillment in activities that generate their own internal rewards. The monastery's approach to food takes on new meaning as you emerge from winter's grip. The simple meals of bread, vegetables, and occasional dairy products that once seemed barely adequate now taste rich and satisfying. Your body, trained by months of cold to extract maximum nutrition from minimal resources, has become more efficient at converting food into energy and warmth. The hot meals that you treasured so desperately during winter now seem almost indulgent, a reminder of how much your baseline expectations have shifted. The warming room loses much of its social significance as the weather improves. But its role in the winter hierarchy has taught you important lessons about human nature and spiritual aspiration. You've seen how even the most dedicated religious communities develop systems of privilege and deprivation, how the pursuit of comfort can subtly undermine ideals of equality and selflessness. These observations force you to examine your own motivations and desires with a clarity that wouldn't have been possible without the winter's harsh education. The memory of winter cold begins to take on an almost sacramental quality as spring progresses. You find yourself recalling specific nights of intense suffering, not with horror, but with a strange kind of gratitude. Those experiences have become reference points for understanding your own capacity for endurance, markers of spiritual growth that can't be measured by any external standard. The worst nights of shivering sleeplessness have transformed into treasured memories of trials overcome, of limits transcended through faith and determination. The physical changes in your body tell the story of successful adaptation to extremes that most humans never experience. Your circulation has improved dramatically. Your tolerance for cold has increased far beyond normal ranges. And your ability to generate heat efficiently has been honed by months of necessity. These adaptations represent more than mere survival there. Evidence of the human capacity for transformation under pressure. Proof that the boundaries we imagine for human endurance are often far more flexible than we assume. The monastery's architectural features take on new meaning as you understand their role in the system of spiritual education through controlled suffering. The unheated dormitory, the stone floors, the narrow windows are not design flaws or evidence of medieval primitiveness there. Sophisticated tools for psychological and spiritual transformation. The builders understood that comfort breeds complacency, that ease of living can become an obstacle to spiritual growth. By systematically removing sources of physical pleasure, they created an environment where transformation becomes possible. The theological implications of your winter experience begin to clarify as the season changes. You've lived through a concrete example of the medieval belief that suffering, properly understood and voluntarily accepted, can become a vehicle for spiritual enlightenment. The cold that seems so meaningless and cruel during the worst nights now reveals itself as a teacher that couldn't have been replaced by any amount of book learning or contemplative prayer. The knowledge gained through systematic discomfort has a quality and depth that purely intellectual understanding lacks. The relationship between individual suffering and community. Solidarity has been revealed in ways that surprise you. The shared experience of cold created bonds between the monks that transcend the normal hierarchies of age and authority, even though talking was forbidden in the dormitory. A form of communication developed that was based on shared understanding of struggle. The winter created a fellowship of endurance that will persist long after the temperatures rise, as spring fully establishes itself and the memory of winter's worst extremes begins to fade. You find yourself looking forward to the next winter with an attitude that would have seemed impossible a year ago, not because you've learned to enjoy cold and discomfort, but because you've discovered that you're capable of surviving and even growing through experiences that once seemed unbearable. The winter dormitory has taught you that human beings are far more resilient and adaptable than comfortable living allows us to discover. The broader lesson of your winter experience extends beyond the monastery walls to questions about human potential and the role of challenge in personal development. You've learned that systematic discomfort, voluntarily accepted and properly framed, can become a powerful tool for discovering inner resources and capabilities. The medieval monastics understood something about human psychology that modern comfort-oriented society has largely forgotten, that ease and pleasure, while desirable, can become obstacles to the full development of human potential. The approaching summer, with its promise of warmth and relative ease, no longer seems like an unmixed blessing. You've learned to value the educational power of difficulty, to see challenge as opportunity rather than obstacle. The comfortable months ahead will provide their own lessons and their own forms of spiritual discipline. but they won't offer the particular kind of growth that comes only through voluntary engagement with the edges of human endurance. As you settle into sleep on one of the first genuinely warm nights of spring, feeling the stone floor beneath your mattress holding warmth rather than conducting cold, you realize that the winter has fundamentally changed your understanding of what constitutes a good life. Comfort and ease, while pleasant, are not necessary for happiness or fulfillment. The capacity for contentment, you've learned, exists independently of external circumstances and can be developed through practice and discipline. But even as you celebrate your survival and growth through the winter's trials, can't help wondering, what other tests await in the monastic life? What other aspects of human nature will be challenged and transformed by the systematic application of voluntary difficulty? The winter dormitory was just one classroom in the vast university of monastic formation, and your education has only just. You are Brother Stephen, and it is the year 1198 at the Benedictine Monastery of Cluny, the most powerful and influential monastery in all of Christendom. The massive stone complex houses over 300 monks, making it a small city devoted entirely to prayer, work, and the pursuit of spiritual perfection. Tonight, however, as you lie on your straw mattress in the great dormitory, sleep eludes you for reasons that have nothing to do with cold or discomfort. Tomorrow morning, you will face judgment in the chapter house for a transgression that seems minor to modern eyes, but represents a serious breach of monastic discipline. You were caught speaking during the period of strict silence in the cloister. The weight of impending judgment transforms the familiar sounds of the dormitory into an orchestra of anxiety. Every breath from your sleeping brothers seems amplified. Every small movement becomes a reminder of the surveillance that governs monastic life. The circator making his rounds through the dormitory moves like a silent specter, his soft footsteps on the stone floor marking the passage of time toward the morning when your fate will be decided. You understand now why medieval people spoke of the dark night of the soul. It's not just a metaphor, but a literal description of lying awake in darkness, consumed by the knowledge of coming judgment. The chapter house at Cluny is a masterpiece of Romanesque architecture that serves as both a functional meeting space and a powerful symbol of monastic authority. Built in the form of a semicircle with stone benches arranged in rising tiers, it resembles nothing so much as a Roman amphitheater designed for intellectual rather than gladiatorial combat. The acoustics of the space are perfect, designed to carry the softest whisper to every corner of the room when the abbot speaks from his throne-like chair at the focal point of the semicircle. His words reach every monk with crystalline clarity, ensuring that no one can claim ignorance of decisions made or punishments announced. The daily chapter meeting is theoretically a gathering for spiritual discussion and administrative business, but in practice it serves as the monastery's court of justice, its center of surveillance, and its most powerful tool for maintaining discipline among hundreds of strong-willed men who have surrendered their freedom to pursue spiritual perfection. Every morning after prime, the entire community gathers in the chapter house to hear the rule of Saint Benedict read aloud, to discuss monastery business, and to address any failures of discipline that have been reported the system of monastic surveillance that feeds information to the chapter house is more sophisticated and comprehensive than anything that existed in the secular world of 1198. Every monk is expected to observe his brothers constantly, noting violations of the rule that range from major infractions like theft or violence to minor lapses like improper posture during prayer or failure to maintain proper silence. The monastery operates on the principle that individual spiritual progress depends on community accountability, which means that every action, every word, every gesture is subject to scrutiny and potential correction. Your particular transgression occurred 3 days ago in the cloister, the covered walkway that surrounds the monastery's central courtyard. You were walking from the scriptorium to the church for the afternoon service of Sext. when you encountered Brother Marcus, who was clearly distressed about something. In violation of the strict silence that governs movement through the monastery, you asked him what was wrong. He whispered a response about troubles with his assigned manuscript work, and you offered a brief word of encouragement. The entire exchange lasted perhaps 30 seconds and involved fewer than 20 words. But Brother Augustine, the monastery's chancellor and a man known for his rigid adherence to the rule, witnessed the conversation from across the cloister. Within hours, your names had been recorded in the ledger of infractions that would be read at the next chapter meeting. The violation seems trivial, a moment of human compassion that broke a rule designed to promote spiritual focus, but in the totalitarian world of Cluniac monasticism, no transgression is too small to merit attention and correction. The 3 days since your reported violation have passed in a state of suspended anxiety that has affected every aspect of your monastic life. Your prayers have been distracted by thoughts of the coming judgment. Your work in the scriptorium has suffered as your mind wanders to possible punishments. Your sleep has been fitful and interrupted by dreams of public humiliation. Psychological pressure of waiting for judgment has proven to be its own form of punishment, perhaps more severe than any physical penalty that might be imposed. The monastery's approach to discipline reflects a sophisticated understanding of human psychology that wouldn't be matched by secular institutions for centuries. The delay between transgression and judgment is deliberate, designed to maximize the psychological impact of accountability. The knowledge that punishment is coming, but uncertainty about its nature and severity, creates a state of anxiety that serves as both deterrent and penance. The 3 days of waiting have already taught you more about the importance of following the rule than any lecture or reading assignment could have accomplished. The social dynamics of the monastery shift subtly when a monk is awaiting judgment. Your brothers treat you with a mixture of sympathy and distance, understanding your situation but not wanting to be associated with your transgression. The conversations that normally flow around the monastery's work areas become more stilted when you're present. Even Brother Marcus, your partner in the original violation, has avoided eye contact since your names were entered in the ledger. The isolation created by impending judgment becomes its own form of punishment, separating you from the community bonds that make monastic life bearable. The midnight hours become particularly torturous when you're awaiting chapter house judgment. The regular rhythm of prayer services continues unchanged: vigils at midnight, lauds at 3 a.m., prime at 6 a.m., but your participation takes on a different quality. Every Latin phrase you chant seems to mock your failure to maintain proper discipline. The prayers for forgiveness and mercy that are normally routine become desperate personal petitions. The communal nature of the services, which usually provides comfort and solidarity, now emphasizes your isolation as someone who has violated the community's trust. The physical architecture of the monastery reinforces the psychological pressure of awaiting judgment. The chapter house sits at the heart of the monastic complex, directly adjacent to the church and connected to the cloister by a wide doorway that ensures maximum visibility every time you pass through the cloister for prayers or meals. You see the doorway that leads to your judgment. The building itself becomes a constant reminder of the accounting that awaits you. The carved stone decorations of the chapter house tell their own story about the nature of monastic justice. The capitals of the columns that support the vaulted ceiling depict scenes of biblical judgment: Daniel in the lion's den, the last judgment, the separation of the sheep from the goats. These images serve as visual reminders that earthly justice in the monastery reflects divine justice in the cosmic order. The abbot, who will judge your case, sits beneath these carvings, positioned as God's representative on earth with authority to determine your spiritual faith. Social hierarchy of the monastery becomes most visible during chapter house proceedings. The seating arrangement reflects a complex order of precedence based on length of service, spiritual authority, and administrative responsibility. The abbot occupies the throne-like chair at the focal point, flanked by the prior and other senior officers. The choir monks sit according to their rank and years of profession, while novices and junior monks occupy the lowest tiers. Your position in this hierarchy will determine not just where you sit during your judgment, but also how your case is perceived and what punishments are considered appropriate. The range of possible punishments available to the chapter house reflects the monastery's sophisticated understanding of human motivation and behavior. Minor infractions might result in extra work assignments, temporary exclusion from certain meals, or requirement to perform public penance. More serious violations could lead to physical punishment, period of imprisonment, or, in extreme cases, expulsion from the community. The uncertainty about which category your transgression falls into adds to the psychological torment of waiting. The theology of punishment in medieval monasticism goes far beyond simple deterrence or retribution. The monastic community sees discipline as a form of spiritual medicine, a way of correcting the soul's tendency towards sin and selfishness. Punishment is theoretically administered with love rather than anger, designed to restore the monk to proper spiritual health rather than simply to make him suffer. This therapeutic understanding of discipline makes the process more complex and psychologically sophisticated than secular justice systems of the same period. The role of public confession in monastic discipline adds another layer of psychological complexity to the chapter house proceedings. Before any punishment is announced, you will be required to stand before the entire community and acknowledge your transgression. This public admission of guilt serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates your acceptance of the community's authority. It provides an opportunity for genuine repentance. And it serves as a warning to other monks who might be tempted to similar violations. The educational function of public punishment extends far beyond the individual monk being disciplined. Every member of the community is required to witness the proceedings, see the consequences of rule breaking, and to reflect on their own. Compliance with monastic standards, the chapter house becomes a classroom where lessons about obedience, humility, and community responsibility are taught through concrete examples rather than abstract principles. The anticipation of public humiliation proves to be one of the most difficult aspects of awaiting judgment. You find yourself imagining the moment when you'll have to stand before 300 of your brothers and admit to a failure that seems both trivial and profound. The shame of disappointing the community that has accepted you as a brother weighs more heavily than any physical punishment you might receive. This psychological preparation is itself a form of penance that begins long before you enter the chapter house, the midnight hours. Stretch endlessly as you contemplate the various ways your case might unfold. Will the abbot show mercy for a first offense? Will the community demand strict punishment to maintain discipline? Will Brother Marcus, your partner in the violation, receive the same penalty, or will your punishments differ based on your respective roles in the transgression? These questions cycle through your mind with the relentless rhythm of the monastic bells that mark the passage of night hours. The physical discomfort, lying awake on the hard dormitory floor, becomes secondary to the mental anguish of uncertainty. Your body eventually finds rest, but your mind remains active, churning through scenarios and possibilities with an energy that makes sleep impossible. The stone walls that normally provide security and enclosure now feel like the walls of a prison, trapping you with your anxiety until dawn brings. The moment of reckoning, as the first light of dawn begins to filter through the narrow dormitory windows, you realize that your night of sleepless anticipation has already served as a significant punishment. The hours of worry, self-examination, and dread have forced you to confront the seriousness of monastic discipline in a way that no lecture could have achieved. The psychological torment of waiting has prepared you for whatever judgment the chapter house might deliver. the bell for prime rings with unusual clarity in the dawn air, signaling the beginning of your day of judgment. As you rise from your straw mattress and join the procession toward the church, you carry with you the accumulated weight of 3 sleepless nights and the knowledge that within hours you'll face the assembled community in the most formal and intimidating setting the monastery can provide. The architecture of judgment awaits, and with it, a test of your commitment to the monastic life that will define your relationship with the community for years. The morning of your judgment dawns, gray and cold, with a persistent drizzle that seems to match the somber mood settling over the monastery. As you file into the church for prime with your 300 brothers, you feel the weight of their awareness pressing against you like a physical force. Word of the coming chapter house proceedings has spread through the community with the efficiency that characterizes all monastic communication, and you sense the mixture of sympathy, curiosity, and moral satisfaction that your situation has generated among the brothers. The prime service itself takes on a surreal quality when you know that judgment awaits immediately afterward. The familiar Latin phrases of the Psalms seem to comment directly on your situation. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your great compassion, and create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within. The liturgy that normally provides comfort and structure now becomes a preview of the themes that will dominate your chapter house experience. Every prayer for forgiveness resonates with personal urgency. Every call for divine guidance becomes a desperate petition for the wisdom to handle whatever judgment awaits. As prime concludes and the community prepares to move to the chapter house, you notice the subtle choreography that governs this transition. The senior monks file out first, followed by the choir monks in order of precedence, while novices and junior monks bring up the rear. Your position in this procession has been altered by your pending judgment. Instead of walking with monks of similar rank, you've been instructed to wait and enter with Brother Marcus, creating a small group of penitents that everyone can identify, and observe. The chapter house itself has been prepared for the morning's business with a formality that emphasizes the seriousness of the proceedings. The stone benches have been swept clean, fresh rushes have been laid on the floor, and additional oil lamps have been lit to ensure that every corner of the semicircular room is clearly illuminated. The abbot's chair has been polished and fitted, with embroidered cushions that reflect his authority as judge and spiritual father of the community. The overall effect is of a sacred space prepared for sacred business, elevating the mundane matter of disciplinary proceedings to the level of religious ritual. The seating arrangement in the chapter tells the story of monastic hierarchy more clearly than any written document could. The most senior monks occupy the front rows, their positions reflecting decades of faithful service and spiritual advancement. Behind them sit the ordinary choir monks, arranged according to the date of their profession and their current responsibilities within the community. The novices and youngest monks occupy the highest tiers, where they can observe the proceedings but are reminded of their subordinate status by their physical elevation above the real action. Brother Augustine, the chancellor who reported your violation, sits in a position of honor near the abbot's chair, his ledger of infractions open before him like a book of judgment. His role in the proceedings extends far beyond simple record-keeping. He serves as the monastery's chief prosecutor, the guardian of disciplinary standards who ensures that no violation goes unnoticed or unpunished. His meticulous documentation of every breach of the rule has made him both feared and respected throughout the community, a man whose attention to detail serves the larger purpose of maintaining the spiritual discipline that keeps hundreds of strong-willed individuals functioning as a unified community. The formal opening of the chapter meeting follows a ritual that has been refined over centuries of monastic practice. The abbot takes his seat and calls the community to order with a phrase in Latin that translates roughly as "Let us speak of the affairs of God." A selected monk reads a portion of the rule of Saint Benedict, chosen for its relevance to the day's business. Today's reading focuses on the importance of obedience and the dangers of murmuring complaints or criticisms that undermine community unity. The choice of text is clearly directed at your case, establishing the theological framework within which your violation will be judged. The transition from general spiritual instruction to specific disciplinary matters occurs with a formality that transforms the chapter house into a courtroom. Brother Augustine rises and announces that there are matters of discipline to be addressed. Reading from his ledger in a clear voice that carries to every corner of the room, your name and Brother Marcus's are called, along with a precise description of your violation, speaking in the cloister during the period of strict silence. Contrary to the rule and the established customs of this, walk from your seat to the center of the chapter house floor feels like the longest journey of your life. Every eye in the room follows your movement as you and Brother Marcus take your positions before the abbot's chair. The stone floor beneath your feet is worn smooth by centuries of similar proceedings, a physical reminder that you're participating in a ritual that has played out thousands of times before, with other monks who face their own moments of judgment and correction. The acoustics of the chapter house, designed to carry the softest whisper to every corner, now work against you, as your breathing becomes audible to the entire assembly. The semicircular architecture focuses sound toward the center of the room, where you stand exposed to the scrutiny of the entire community. Every sound you make, the rustle of your habit, the scuff of your sandals on stone, the nervous clearing of your throat becomes magnified and amplified until you feel as though your very thoughts are audible to the assembled. Judges. The formal process of confession begins with the abbot's invitation to speak, delivered in a tone that manages to be both pastoral and judicial. Brother Stephen, he says, his voice carrying clearly through the stone chamber. You have been accused of violating the silence of the cloister. Do you acknowledge this transgression and seek the correction of your brothers? The phrasing of the question is carefully crafted to elicit not just admission of guilt, but also acceptance of the community's authority to judge and correct here. Response must navigate a complex set of expectations that go far beyond simple factual accuracy. The monastic ideal of humility requires that you accept full responsibility for your actions without making excuses or attempting to justify your behavior at the same time. The community expects genuine contrition rather than mere formal compliance. With the confession ritual, your words must demonstrate that you understand not just what you did wrong, but why it was wrong and how it damaged the spiritual fabric of the community. Yes, Father Abbot, you reply, your voice smaller than you intended in the vast stone space. I spoke to Brother Marcus in the cloister when silence was required. I violated the rule through lack of attention to my spiritual duties and failure to maintain proper custody of my tongue. I ask forgiveness of God, of you, and of all my brothers, and I seek whatever correction you deem necessary for my spiritual. The response satisfies the formal requirements of monastic confession. But the abbot's penetrating gaze suggests that he's looking for something deeper than ritual compliance. The chapter house proceedings serve multiple educational purposes beyond simple punishment. And part of the abbot's role is to extract lessons that will benefit not just the accused monk, but the entire community. His follow-up questions probe the circumstances of your violation, the state of mind that led to it, and your understanding of why such rules exist in the first place. Tell us, Brother Stephen, the abbot continues, what was so urgent that it could not wait for a time when speech was permitted? What matter was so pressing that it required you to violate the sacred silence that protects our community's spiritual focus? The questions are designed to reveal whether your violation was a moment of weakness or a sign of deeper problems. With accepting monastic discipline, your explanation of the circumstances Brother Marcus's obvious distress, your impulse to offer comfort, the brief exchange of words that seemed like an act of charities, and increasingly weak as you voice it in the formal setting of the chapter house. The community's silence amplifies your words. While also serving as a form of judgment in itself, you can sense the collective evaluation of your motives. The weighing of your actions against the standards of monastic perfection that everyone in the room has committed their lives to pursuing. Brother Marcus's confession follows a similar pattern, but his responses reveal a different perspective on the same incident. He acknowledges that he should have waited for an appropriate time to seek counsel, that his distress over his manuscript work was not sufficient justification for violating the rule, and that he accepts full responsibility for drawing you into his transgression. The public nature of the confession process allows the community to see how the same violation can be understood and experienced differently by different individuals. Abbott's response to your confessions reveals the sophisticated Dessau psychology that governs monastic discipline. Rather than moving immediately to punishment, he uses the moment as an opportunity for teaching, addressing not just you and Brother Marcus, but the entire community. He speaks about the importance of silence in monastic life, explaining how seemingly minor violations can damage the spiritual atmosphere that the community works so hard to maintain. He discusses the tension between charity and obedience, acknowledging that your impulse to help Brother Marcus was good in itself, while explaining why it was wrong in its execution. The educational dimension of the proceedings becomes most apparent when the abbot invites other monks to comment on your case. Several senior brothers speak about their own experiences with similar temptations, sharing stories of times when they had to choose between immediate charity and long-term discipline. Their testimonies transform your individual failure into a community-wide examination of monastic values and priorities, making the chapter house session a forum for collective spiritual growth rather than simple punishment. The psychological impact of standing before the entire community while your case is discussed extends far beyond whatever formal punishment might be imposed. The experience of having your actions analyzed, your motives questioned, and your spiritual state evaluated by hundreds of your brothers creates a form of accountability that reaches into every aspect of your inner life you begin to understand. That monastic discipline is not just about following rules, but about accepting a level of transparency and vulnerability that most people never experience. The chapter house proceedings also reveal the complex social dynamics that govern life in a large monastic community. You notice which monks nod approvingly during the discussion of your case and which ones seem more sympathetic to your situation. The facial expressions and body language of your brothers provide clues about your standing in the community and the likely reception of whatever punishment is announced. The public nature of the process means that the judgment extends far beyond the formal pronouncement to include the informal evaluations of every member of the community. As the discussion of your case draws toward its conclusion, you realize that the most significant punishment has already been administered. The experience of public confession, detailed examination of your motives, and community evaluation of your actions has forced you to confront aspects of your character and commitment that might otherwise have remained hidden. The chapter house has served as a mirror, reflecting back an image of yourself that is both humbling and educational. The abbot's final questions focus on your understanding of the lessons learned and your commitment to future compliance with the rule. His inquiries probe not just your intellectual comprehension of monastic discipline, but your emotional and spiritual acceptance of the values that govern community life. The distinction is crucial because simple rule following without inner conversion leads to the kind of legalistic compliance that the monastic tradition views as spiritually worthless. As you stand in the center of the chapter house, surrounded by your brothers and awaiting the announcement of your punishment, you realize that the process has already achieved its primary purpose. You have been reminded of your place in the community hierarchy, your dependence on the group for spiritual guidance, and your responsibility to maintain the standards that make monastic life possible. Whatever formal penalty follows will be secondary. to the psychological and spiritual education that has already taken place in this theater of confession and the moment of judgment arrives with a formality that transforms the chapter house into a sacred courtroom where divine and human justice intersect. Abbot Hugh rises from his carved wooden chair, and the rustling of 300 habits falling. Silent creates a profound quiet that seems to press against the stone walls. In this moment, he embodies not just administrative authority, but the spiritual power to determine your fate within the community that has become your entire world. The weight of centuries of monastic tradition settles on his shoulders as he prepares to pronounce judgment that will serve multiple purposes: punishment, education, restoration, and warning. Brother Stephen and Brother Marcus, the abbot begins, its voice carrying clearly through the acoustically perfect chamber. You have confessed to violating the sacred silence that protects our community's spiritual focus. Your transgression, while born of good intentions, demonstrates a failure to understand that individual charity must never supersede communal discipline. The rule of our Father, Saint Benedict, teaches us that obedience is the first virtue of monastic life. The foundation upon which all other spiritual progress depends. The theological framework that the abbot establishes for your punishment reflects the sophisticated understanding of human psychology that medieval monasticism had developed over centuries of dealing with the challenge of transforming ordinary men into spiritual athletes. Your violation is not treated as a simple breach of regulations, but as a symptom of deeper spiritual issues that require careful diagnosis and treatment. The punishment, when it comes, will be designed not just to deter future violations, but to address the root causes that led to your failure of discipline. Brother Stephen, the abbot continues, turning his full attention to you. Your desire to comfort a distressed brother shows a charitable heart, but your method shows a lack of wisdom and proper order. You chose immediate gratification of your compassionate impulses over the patient discipline that would have led you to find appropriate ways to help. This reveals pride disguised as charity, the assumption that your judgment of what was needed in the moment was superior to the wisdom of the rule that governs our common. The psychological precision of this analysis cuts deeper than any physical punishment could reach. The abbot has identified the spiritual flaw that led to your violation, the subtle pride that allows individual will to override communal discipline. By naming this pride explicitly, he forces you to confront an aspect of your character that you might never have recognized without this public examination. The humiliation of having your motives dissected before the entire community becomes itself a form of spiritual medicine, designed to purge the ego that led to the original transgression. Therefore, the abbot announces, you will spend the next 7 days in a program of special discipline designed to strengthen your understanding of obedience and silence. Each morning after prime, you will prostrate yourself before the community in the chapter house and ask forgiveness for your violation. You will eat only bread and water for these 7 days, taking your meals alone in the penitential cell rather than with the community. You will perform additional manual labor each afternoon, working in silence under the supervision of Brother Benedict in the monastery's most demanding agricultural. The structure of your punishment reveals the monastic understanding of how transformation occurs through controlled suffering. The daily public prostration ensures that your transgression remains visible to the community, serving as both personal reminder and collective warning. The restricted diet attacks the body's comfort, creating a physical discomfort that serves as constant reminder of spiritual failure. The additional labor provides constructive outlet for the energy that might otherwise be directed toward resentment or self-pity. Brother Marcus receives a similar but slightly lighter sentence, reflecting the community's understanding that his role in the violation was more passive than yours. His punishment consists of 5 days of bread and water, daily prostration, and additional time in the scriptorium copying penitential psalms. The difference in your sentences provides an object lesson for the community about degrees of responsibility. and the importance of individual accountability even within shared transgressions. The physical act of prostration that begins your punishment immediately establishes the proper relationship between penitent and community. As you lie face down on the stone floor of the chapter house, your body forms a physical symbol of submission that communicates more powerfully than any verbal expression of repentance. The cold stone against your face and chest provides sensory reinforcement of your lowered status, while the weight of the community's gaze presses down on you like a physical force. The formula of words you must speak during prostration has been refined over centuries to maximize both humiliation and spiritual education. My brothers, you. Say your voice muffled by the stone floor. I have sinned against God and against our holy community by violating the sacred silence. I ask your forgiveness and your prayers as I seek to amend my life and restore my commitment to our common. The public nature of this confession serves multiple purposes. It demonstrates your acceptance of the community's judgment. It provides an opportunity for genuine repentance. And it reinforces for all present the seriousness of monastic discipline. The bread and water diet that accompanies your punishment represents one of the monastery's most effective tools for spiritual formation. The constant mild hunger creates a physical discomfort that serves as a reminder of spiritual failure, while also reducing the body's energy in ways that can promote contemplative focus. The simplicity of the diet strips away one of life's basic pleasures, forcing you to find satisfaction in spiritual rather than physical sources. The 7-day duration ensures that the hunger becomes more than momentary discomfort, developing into a sustained experience that reshapes your relationship with desire and satisfaction. The penitential cell where you take your solitary meals becomes a classroom for self-examination and spiritual reflection. This small stone chamber, barely large enough for a single person, contains only a simple wooden table, a bench, and a crucifix on the wall. The isolation forces you to confront your thoughts and emotions without the distraction of community interaction, while the stark surroundings eliminate any possibility of comfort or entertainment. The cell serves as a laboratory for the kind of interior work that monasticism considers essential for spiritual growth. The additional manual labor assigned as part of your punishment provides physical expression of the spiritual work of repentance. Working under Brother Benedict's supervision in the monasteries, fields, and gardens, you engage in the kind of humble, repetitive tasks that medieval monastics considered especially valuable for spiritual formation. The physical exhaustion creates a state of mind that is more receptive to spiritual insight, while the productive nature of the work ensures that your punishment contributes positively to the community's welfare. The psychological stages of serving your punishment reveal the sophisticated understanding of human nature that underlies monastic discipline. The first days are dominated by shame and resentment, as you struggle to accept the justice of your sentence and the accuracy of the community's judgment. The daily prostrations feel humiliating rather than redemptive. The bread and water diet seems arbitrary and harsh, and the additional labor appears to be simple punishment without spiritual purpose. But as the days progress, the cumulative effect of the disciplinary program begins to produce the psychological changes that justify its design. The constant mild hunger and physical exhaustion create a state of consciousness that is more open to self-examination and spiritual insight. The daily public confession gradually shifts from mere formal compliance to genuine acknowledgement of the spiritual issues that led to your violation. The manual labor begins to feel less like punishment and more like opportunity for the kind of meditative practice that monasticism values highly. The community's response to your punishment reveals the complex social dynamics that govern monastic life. Some brothers express sympathy through subtle gestures and nod of encouragement after your daily prostration, a brief word of support during work periods. Others maintain a deliberate distance, viewing your violation as evidence of spiritual immaturity that requires correction rather than comfort. The mixed response forces you to navigate the monastery's social environment with greater attention to the subtle signs of acceptance and rejection. That rejection community relationships. The restoration phase of your punishment begins to manifest. Around the fourth day, the physical and psychological effects of the disciplinary program start to produce genuine spiritual insights. You begin to understand not just what you did wrong, but why the rule exists and how individual violations can damage the spiritual atmosphere that hundreds of monks work together to maintain. The hunger and exhaustion that initially seemed like arbitrary suffering reveal themselves as tools for spiritual education, methods for learning truths about desire, pride, and community that can't be taught through lectures or reading. The final day of your punishment brings a mixture of relief and gratitude that surprises you with its intensity. The daily prostration feels like genuine prayer rather than forced humiliation, and the prospect of returning to normal meals and community interaction takes on the quality of resurrection. You realize that the punishment has accomplished its intended purpose. It has transformed your understanding of yourself, your relationship to the community, and your commitment to the monastic life. The formal conclusion of your punishment occurs in the chapter house, where the same community that witnessed your judgment now observes your restoration. The abbot's announcement that your penance is complete carries the weight of official forgiveness, but more importantly, it marks your full restoration to the community's fellowship. The brothers' responsa collective Deo Gratias, thanks be to God, expresses their joy at your return to full membership and their confidence that the disciplinary process has achieved its spiritual purposes. The long-term effects of your experience with monastic discipline extend far beyond the 7 days of formal punishment. Your relationship with the rule has been transformed from external compliance to internal acceptance, and your understanding of community life has deepened through the experience of temporary exclusion and restoration. The memory of prostration and hunger serves as a permanent reminder of the consequences of spiritual carelessness, while the experience of forgiveness and restoration reinforces your commitment to the monastic path as you resume your normal place in the community's prayers, meals, and work. You carry with you a deeper appreciation for the wisdom embedded in monastic tradition. The chapter house has served its purpose as a theater of transformation, a space where individual failure becomes community education and punishment becomes restoration. The experience has taught you that true discipline is not about following rules, but about accepting the kind of accountability and transparency that allows a community of human beings to function as a spiritual organism. But even as you celebrate your restoration to full community membership, you can't help wondering, what other trials await in the monastic life? The chapter house has revealed one aspect of the monastery's power to shape human behavior and consciousness. But surely it's not the only arena where the tension between individual will and communal discipline plays out. You are Brother Joachim, and the year is 1216 at the Benedictine Monastery of Monte Cassino, the mother house of Western monasticism, founded by Saint Benedict himself 7 centuries ago. Tonight, as the midnight bell rings for vigils, you will not join your brothers in the choir stalls for the night office. Instead, you have been assigned to the infirmary, where 5 seriously ill monks require care that cannot wait for daylight. The infirmary represents one of the few places in monastic life where the normal rhythm of prayer and work yields to the immediate demands of human need, creating a unique environment where spiritual discipline and physical compassion intersect. In complex and challenging ways, the infirmary at Monte Cassino is a world unto itself, operating according to rules that modify and sometimes override the standard requirements of monastic life. Built as a separate complex connected to the main monastery by covered walkways, it consists of a large ward for general cases, private cells for the most seriously ill, a pharmacy where medicinal herbs are prepared, and a kitchen where special Diets can be prepared for those whose conditions require different nutrition, most importantly for tonight's vigil. It contains the only consistently heated rooms in the entire monastery, making it a sanctuary of warmth as well as healing in the depths of winter. Your role as infirmarian places you in one of the most complex positions within the monastic hierarchy. You have authority to modify the rule itself when medical necessity demands it, allowing sick monks to eat meat, providing warm clothing, permitting extended sleep, even excusing attendance at the divine office. This power to grant exemptions from the otherwise absolute demands of monastic discipline makes you both a figure of mercy and an object of subtle resentment from healthy monks who must continue to follow the full rigor of the rule. The 5 patients under your care tonight represent the full spectrum of medieval monastic mortality. Brother Anselm, 83 years old and one of the monastery's most revered scholars, lies dying of what medieval medicine calls the fever of age, probably pneumonia, complicated by the general decline of extreme old age. Brother Gregory, a man in his 40s, suffers from what the monastery's medical texts describe as wasting sickness, likely tuberculosis, that has been consuming his strength for months. Brother Thomas, barely 25, was injured 3 days ago when a stone fell from the monastery's construction project, crushing his leg and creating a wound that shows signs of the putrefaction that medieval healers feared above all other complications. Brother Vincent, approaching 50, has been struggling with what medieval medicine termed melancholia, a deep depression that has left him unable to eat, sleep, or participate in community life. The monastic understanding of mental illness combines spiritual and physical explanations, viewing such conditions as either divine trials sent to test faith or imbalances in the body's humors that require careful medical intervention. Finally, Brother Paul, a robust man of 38, has been brought low by the bloody flux dysentery. That has left him so weakened that he can barely lift his head from his pillow. The architecture of the infirmary reflects the monastery's sophistication, understanding of the relationship between physical environment and healing. Unlike the deliberately austere dormitories and unheated churches that characterize the rest of the monastery, the infirmary is designed for comfort and recovery. The large ward has windows. It's positioned to capture maximum sunlight during the day, and the walls are painted white rather than left as bare stone to create a sense of lightness and cleanliness. Most crucially, fireplaces in both the ward and the private cells ensure that the temperature remains warm enough to support healing, rather than simply survival. NS like Avicenna and raises, creating a surprisingly sophisticated foundation for medieval medical practice. Your understanding of anatomy, though limited by religious prohibitions against dissection, incorporates knowledge gained from treating wounds, setting bones, and observing the progression of diseases over many years of practice. The pharmacy attached to the infirmary houses an extensive collection of medicinal herbs and prepared remedies that represent centuries of accumulated medical knowledge. Shelves, lined with ceramic jars, contain everything from basic analgesics, light willow bark extract, to complex compounds designed to treat specific conditions. You have access to opium for extreme pain, various herbs for reducing fever, purgatives for cleansing the body of corrupted humors, and even surgical instruments for procedures that require more aggressive intervention. The monastery's gardens provide fresh herbs during the growing season, while dried preparations ensure that treatment can continue through the winter months. The spiritual dimension of your medical practice creates unique challenges that have no parallel in secular medicine. Each patient's condition must be understood not just as a physical ailment, but as a spiritual trial that offers opportunities for grace, purification, and deeper faith. Your role extends beyond treating symptoms to helping patients understand their suffering within the larger framework of divine providence and eternal salvation. This means that healing becomes a collaborative process involving not just medical intervention, but prayer, confession, spiritual counseling, and preparation for the possibility of death. The night shift in the medieval infirmary presents challenges that are both medical and logistical. During the hours when the rest of the monastery sleeps, you must monitor 5 seriously ill patients, administer medications according to complex schedules, respond to medical emergencies, and maintain the spiritual atmosphere that transforms. The infirmary from a mere hospital into a place of sacred healing, the responsibility is enormous, as decisions made during the night hours often determine whether patients survive until morning. Brother Anselm requires the most intensive monitoring. His age and the severity of his condition mean that his death could occur at any moment, and your duty includes ensuring that he receives the last rites and spiritual preparation that will ease his transition from this life to the next throughout. The night you check his breathing, monitor his temperature by feeling his forehead, and watch for signs that the end is approaching. His peaceful demeanor suggests that he has made his peace with death, but your vigilance ensures that he won't die alone or without the spiritual support that monastic tradition considers essential for a good death. Brother Gregory's tuberculosis requires different, but equally demanding attention. His persistent cough disrupts his sleep and threatens to spread the disease to other patients, requiring you to balance his need for rest with the necessity of preventing contagion. You administer herbal remedies designed to suppress the cough and ease his breathing, while also ensuring that his bedding is changed frequently and that he maintains the isolation necessary to protect the other patients. His condition has been declining steadily, and you suspect that he, like Brother Anselm, may not survive much longer. Brother Thomas's injured leg presents the most complex medical challenge of your night shift. The crush injury has created a wound that shows signs of putrefaction, and medieval medicine offers limited options for treating such infections. You clean the wound regularly with wine and herbal preparations designed to prevent corruption, change his bandages to keep the injury clean and dry, and monitor his overall condition for signs that the infection might be spreading through his body. The possibility of amputation has been discussed, but the monastery's surgical capabilities are limited, and such drastic intervention carries enormous risks. Brother Vincent's mental condition requires a completely different approach that emphasizes spiritual counseling alongside medical treatment. Medieval understanding of depression combines humoral theory, the belief that melancholia results from an excess of black bile, with spiritual explanations that see such conditions as either divine trials or spiritual attacks. Your treatment includes herbal remedies designed to rebalance his humors, but more importantly, it involves lengthy conversations about his spiritual state, gentle encouragement to eat and participate in basic activities, and patient support as he struggles with despair that seems to have no clear cause. Brother Paul's dysentery requires constant attention to prevent dehydration and monitor for signs of improvement or deterioration. You ensure that he drinks regular small amounts of water mixed with herbs designed to settle his stomach and restore his strength. The condition has left him so weak that he requires assistance with the most basic functions, and your care includes the kind of intimate physical attention that challenges normal monastic boundaries about bodily contact and personal privacy, the psychological dimension of night shift. Care in a medieval infirmary involves managing your own emotional responses to suffering, death, and the limitations of medical knowledge. Watching brothers whom you've lived and prayed with for years slowly decline toward death creates a form of anticipatory grief that must be balanced with the spiritual understanding that death is not defeat, but transition. Your faith teaches that suffering can be redemptive and that death is a gateway to eternal life. But these intellectual beliefs provide limited comfort when confronted with the immediate reality of pain and loss, the practical demands of nighttime. Medical care require a complex schedule of interventions that must be coordinated carefully to ensure that each patient receives appropriate attention without neglecting the others. Every 2 hours you make rounds through the ward and private cells, checking on each patient's condition, administering medications, adjusting bedding and room temperature, and providing the reassurance that comes from human presence during the dark hours when fear and pain seem most intense. Between these formal rounds, you remain alert for calls for help, changes in breathing patterns, or other signs that emergency intervention might be needed. The monastery's approach to medical record-keeping reflects both practical necessity and spiritual purpose. You maintain detailed notes about each patient's condition, treatments administered, and responses to intervention, creating a medical history that will inform future care decisions. But these records also serve spiritual purposes, documenting each patient's response to suffering and their preparation for either recovery or death, creating a chronicle of faith under trial that will be preserved as part of the monastery's spiritual heritage. The relationship between medical care and prayer creates a unique rhythm that governs life in the infirmary. While you cannot attend the communal prayer services that structure normal monastic life, you maintain a personal schedule of prayer that weaves through your medical duties. You pray silently while administering medications, offer brief prayers with patients who are conscious and able to participate, and use the quiet moments between medical tasks for the kind of contemplative prayer that forms the heart of monastic spirituality. The long night hours in the infirmary create a unique form of monastic experience that combines intense practical activity with profound spiritual reflection. As you move through the quiet ward, checking on sleeping patients and maintaining the vigilance that keeps them safe through the dark hours, you enter a form of prayer that is simultaneously active and contemplative. The responsibility for human life creates a heightened awareness of divine presence, while the immediate demands of medical care ground spiritual reflection in concrete acts of charity and service. The social dynamics of the infirmary operate according to different rules than those that govern the rest of monastic life. The shared experience of illness and vulnerability breaks down many of the hierarchies that structure normal monastery relationships. Brother Anselm, normally one of the most senior and respected members of the community, now depends on your care for his most basic needs. Brother Thomas, despite his youth and low rank, receives the same quality of attention and concern as the monastery's most distinguished scholars. Illness becomes a great equalizer that reminds everyone of the fundamental humanity that underlies monastic roles and responsibilities. The knowledge that dawn is still hours away creates its own psychological challenges as you settle into the long night of vigilance ahead. Each patient's needs will change throughout the night, requiring constant adaptation of your care plans and vigilant attention to subtle signs of improvement or deterioration. The responsibility weighs heavily as you realize that decisions made during these dark hours may determine whether your patients see another sunrise, and whether their deaths, if they come, occur with the dignity and spiritual preparation that monastic tradition demands. What mysteries of life and death will unfold during the long hours until dawn? What trials of faith and skill await as you navigate the delicate balance between medical intervention and spiritual acceptance? The night in the infirmary stretches ahead like an ocean of time filled with opportunities for both healing and loss, demanding every skill you possess and testing every aspect of your commitment to the monastic ideal of serving others regardless of personal. As the monastery settles into the deep quiet that follows Compline, the infirmary becomes an island of wakefulness in an ocean of sleeping stone. The contrast between the two worlds, the dormitory, where healthy monks rest in preparation for midnight vigils, and the ward where suffering brothers fight through long hours of pain and fever, creates a psychological tension that you feel in every decision about treatment, every moment of choosing between competing medical demands, every prayer whispered over a brother who may not see morning. Brother Anselm's condition deteriorates noticeably as the night progresses. His breathing becomes more labored, the periods between breaths growing longer in a pattern that medieval medicine recognizes as the approach of death. You increase your monitoring, checking on him every 30 minutes rather than every hour, watching for the moment when medical care must yield to spiritual preparation for the final transition. His lucid moments are becoming fewer and shorter. But during one brief awakening around 1 a.m., he grips your hand with surprising strength and whispers a request that pierces your heart. Brother Joachim, don't let me die the promise you make in. Response to Brother Anselm's plea will structure the remainder of your night. Medieval monastic tradition places enormous emphasis on the circumstances of death, believing that the final moments of life provide crucial opportunities for grace, and that dying alone represents a spiritual tragedy that diminishes the entire community. Your commitment to remain with him creates a logistical challenge that forces you to reorganize your entire approach to caring for the other patients. Finding ways to maintain vigilance over 5 seriously ill men while providing the intimate presence that Brother Anselm's approaching death requires. Brother Gregory's tuberculosis creates its own crisis around 2 a.m. when a violent coughing fit brings a blood-tinged sputum that medieval medicine interprets as a sign of advanced pulmonary decay. The hemorrhaging, while not immediately life-threatening, indicates that his condition has entered a new and more dangerous phase. You administer herbal remedies designed to reduce the bleeding and ease his breathing, but the incident forces you to confront the possibility that you may lose 2 patients in a single night. The medical protocols for treating pulmonary hemorrhage conflict with your commitment to remain near Brother Anselm, creating an agonizing choice between competing obligations. The resolution comes through the kind of creative adaptation that characterizes medieval monastic problem solving. You move Brother Gregory's bed closer to Brother Anselm's private cell, creating a configuration that allows you to monitor both patients simultaneously while maintaining the intimate vigil that each situation requires. The arrangement violates normal infirmary protocols about isolation and rest, but it reflects the deeper monastic principle that human relationships take precedence over administrative convenience. The 2 elderly monks, both approaching death, find comfort in each other's presence during the dark hours when mortality presses most heavily upon them. Brother Thomas's infected leg presents a different but equally complex challenge when fever develops during the night, indicating that the putrefaction you've been fighting has begun to spread through his system. The rise in body temperature confirms your worst fears about the wound, and medieval medical theory offers limited options for treating such systemic infections. You apply cold compresses to reduce the fever, administer herbal preparations designed to purify the blood and clean the wound more aggressively in hopes of removing infected tissue. But the most difficult part of treating Brother Thomas is the conversation about prognosis. The gentle preparation for the possibility that his young life may be ending just as it seemed to be reaching its full potential. The psychological impact of watching a 25-year-old monk confront the possibility of death creates a different kind of spiritual challenge than caring for elderly brothers like Anselm and Gregory. Brother Thomas's youth makes his mortality feel more tragic and senseless, challenging your faith in divine providence and forcing you to grapple with questions about why suffering affects some people more than others. His fear is more palpable than the resigned acceptance of the older monks, and his requests for reassurance about recovery require a delicate balance between honesty about his condition and maintenance of the hope that can sometimes contribute to healing. Brother Vincent's depression responds unexpectedly to the crisis atmosphere that develops in the infirmary during the night. The presence of brothers who are fighting for their lives seems to provide him with perspective on his own suffering, and for the first time in weeks, he begins to show interest in helping with their care. His offer to sit with Brother Anselm during brief periods when you must attend to the other patients provides both practical assistance and therapeutic activity that begins to break through the isolation and despair that have characterized his condition. The transformation illustrates medieval medicine's understanding that mental healing often occurs through engagement with others, suffering, rather than through. Focus on one's own problems. Brother Paul's dysentery shows signs of improvement during the night as the herbal treatments begin to take effect and his body starts to recover from the severe dehydration that has weakened him so dramatically. His increased alertness and ability to take liquids without immediate digestive distress represent the first positive medical development of your night shift, but his recovery creates its own challenges. As renewed strength brings awareness of the suffering around him and anxiety about the fate of his fellow patients. His questions about Brother Anselm's condition and Brother Thomas's prognosis require careful responses that balance honesty with sensitivity to his own fragile, emotional state. The pharmaceutical interventions that punctuate your night shift reflect the sophisticated blend of empirical observation and theoretical understanding that characterizes medieval monastic medicine. Your treatments combine drugs derived from plant sources with procedures based on humoral theory, creating therapeutic approaches that sometimes succeed for reasons that medieval medical theory cannot fully explain. The willow bark extract that reduces Brother Thomas's fever works through mechanisms that won't be understood until the discovery of aspirin. Centuries later, while the herbal compounds that ease Brother Gregory's cough contain active ingredients that modern pharmacology recognizes as genuinely effective respiratory treatments. The spiritual dimensions of pharmaceutical care add layers of meaning to each medical intervention that extend far beyond simple symptom relief. Every administration of medication becomes an opportunity for prayer. Every herbal preparation carries symbolic significance related to divine healing power. And every improvement in a patient's condition is interpreted as evidence of divine mercy working through natural means. Your role as infirmarian requires you to see yourself not as an independent medical practitioner, but as an instrument of divine healing, responsible for applying earthly remedies, while recognizing that ultimate recovery comes from sources beyond human control. The relationship between medical intervention and prayer reaches its most complex expression around 3 a.m. when Brother Anselm's condition deteriorates to the point where death seems imminent within hours. The medical protocols for end-of-life care emphasize comfort rather than cure, focusing on pain relief and spiritual preparation rather than aggressive intervention. You administer small amounts of opium to ease his breathing and reduce any pain, while also beginning the spiritual preparations that will help him approach death with peace and dignity. The transition from active treatment to palliative care represents one of the most difficult decisions in medieval medicine, requiring careful judgment about when hope for recovery must yield to acceptance of mortality. The logistics of providing last rites in the middle of the night create practical challenges that test your resourcefulness and commitment to proper spiritual care. Brother Anselm is too weak to be moved to the church, and the monastery's chaplain is sleeping in preparation for his own demanding schedule of religious duties. Your solution involves transforming the infirmary cell into a temporary chapel, arranging candles and religious artifacts to create a sacred space where the dying monk can receive the sacraments that will ease his transition to eternal life. The improvised ceremony lacks the formal grandeur of church rituals, but it possesses an intimacy and immediacy that makes the spiritual reality of death more palpable than any elaborate liturgy could achieve. The involvement of Brother Vincent in Brother Anselm's final preparations creates an unexpected therapeutic breakthrough that illustrates the complex interconnections between physical and mental healing in medieval monastic medicine. His assistance with the practical arrangements for the last rites provides him with a sense of purpose and connection that begins to lift the depression that has dominated his recent months. The experience of helping another person approach death with dignity and faith provides Vincent with perspective on his own suffering and reminds him of the fundamental truth that individual pain must be understood within the larger context of community, solidarity, and mutual support. The medical documentation that you maintain throughout the night reflects both practical necessity and spiritual purpose. Your detailed notes about each patient's condition, treatments administered, and responses to intervention will inform future medical decisions and contribute to the monastery's accumulated medical knowledge, but the records also serve as spiritual chronicles documenting each brother's response to suffering and their preparation for either recovery or death. The notes about Brother Anselm's peaceful acceptance of mortality, Brother Thomas's courage in facing uncertain prognosis, and Brother Vincent's emergence from depression through service to others. Become part of the monastery's spiritual heritage. Examples of faith under trial that will inspire future generations of monks. The rhythm of care that develops during the night creates its own form of prayer that integrates medical intervention with contemplative spirituality. Your movement between patients follows a pattern that resembles monastic liturgy, with each bed becoming a station for specific forms of attention and care. The checking of vital signs becomes a form of attentiveness that parallels the mindfulness cultivated in formal meditation, while the administration of medications requires the same precision and reverence that characterizes liturgical ritual. The night shift transforms into a unique form of contemplative practice that combines active service with deep, spiritual reflection. The social dynamics that emerge among the patients during the night reveal aspects of monastic community that are normally hidden beneath the formal structures of rank and authority. The shared experience of illness and vulnerability creates bonds that transcend the usual hierarchies of age and position within the monastery. Brother Anselm's acceptance of care from much younger brothers. Brother Thomas's grateful dependence on others' expertise and Brother Vincent's discovery of healing through service to fellow sufferers illustrate the deeper equality that underlies monastic life, despite its apparent emphasis on obedience and hierarchy. The psychological preparation for multiple possible deaths during a single night shift requires a form of spiritual detachment that seems to contradict the emotional engagement that good medical care requires. You must remain emotionally present enough to provide compassionate care while also maintaining sufficient distance to make rational medical decisions and cope with the grief that comes from losing brothers with whom you've lived and prayed for years. This balance between attachment and detachment represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of medieval monastic psychology, reflecting centuries of experience with the challenge of caring for others while maintaining spiritual equilibrium. As the night progresses toward dawn, the accumulated weight of medical responsibility, emotional engagement, and spiritual reflection creates a unique state of consciousness that combines exhaustion with heightened awareness. The demands of caring for 5 critically ill patients have pushed you beyond normal human limits. But the intensity of the experience has also opened pathways to spiritual insight that would be impossible under ordinary circumstances. The night shift in the medieval infirmary becomes a form of spiritual ordeal that tests every aspect of your monastic formation while providing opportunities for growth and understanding that can't be achieved through conventional prayer and comfort and study. But even as you celebrate the small victories, Brother Paul's recovery, Brother Vincent's emergence from depression, the peaceful dignity of Brother Anselm's final hours, you remain acutely aware that the night is not over. What further challenges await in the hours before dawn? What tests of skill and faith will emerge as your patients continue their various struggles with mortality and healing? The infirmary night shift has already revealed the complex intersection of medicine and spirituality that characterizes medieval monastic life. But the most difficult hours may still leave, the hours between 4 a.m. and dawn stretch like an eternity as you navigate the delicate balance between hope and resignation that defines end-of-life care in a medieval monastery. Brother Anselm's breathing has become so shallow that you must lean close to detect each breath. while his periods of consciousness grow briefer and more disconnected from the physical world around him. The dying process, which medieval medicine understands as the gradual separation of soul from body, unfolds with a rhythm that seems to exist outside normal time. Each breath might be his last. Yet he continues to cling to life with a tenacity that speaks to the fundamental mystery of human mortality. Brother Gregory's condition stabilizes during these darkest hours, as the herbal treatments for his pulmonary hemorrhage begin to show effect. His breathing becomes less labored, and the blood-tinged sputum that alarmed you earlier in the night gives way to clearer respiratory secretions. The improvement is modest but significant, suggesting that his tuberculosis, while still advanced, may not be immediately life-threatening. The contrast between his gradual stabilization and Brother Anselm's decline illustrates the unpredictable nature of medieval medical practice, where similar symptoms can lead to dramatically different outcomes based on factors that remain largely mysterious to contemporary understanding. Brother Thomas's fever breaks suddenly around 5 a.m., his body temperature dropping so rapidly that you initially fear he has entered the final stage of his illness. But closer examination reveals that the fever reduction represents a positive turning point rather than a terminal crisis. His wound, while still seriously infected, shows signs that the body's natural healing processes may be gaining ground against the putrefaction. The change gives you hope that amputation might not be necessary, though full recovery will require weeks of careful treatment and constant vigilance against renewed infection. The theological implications of these varying medical outcomes create complex questions about divine providence and human responsibility that characterize medieval approaches to healing. Brother Anselm's approaching death at 83 seems to represent the natural conclusion of a life well lived, while Brother Thomas's potential recovery at 25 appears to reflect divine mercy responding to medical intervention and prayer. But the apparent randomness of who improves and who declines challenges simple explanations about virtue rewarded or sin punished, forcing you to grapple with the fundamental mystery of suffering that lies at the heart of monastic spirituality. Brother Vincent's transformation continues throughout the early morning hours as his involvement in caring for the other patients provides him with purpose and perspective that begin to lift the depression that has dominated his recent months. His assistance with Brother Anselm's final preparations reveals a natural compassion and spiritual sensitivity that had been hidden. Beneath his melancholia, the discovery that his own suffering has prepared him to understand and comfort others in their trials provides the beginning of healing that no herbal remedy could have achieved. His case illustrates medieval medicine's understanding that mental and spiritual healing often occur through engagement with community rather than through isolation and self-focus. Brother Paul's recovery accelerates as the night progresses, his digestive system gradually returning to normal function and his strength beginning to rebuild after days of debilitating illness. His improvement creates practical challenges as renewed energy makes him restless and eager to resume normal activities. But his body still requires extended recovery before he can return to the demanding schedule of monastic life. The psychological adjustment to recovery proves almost as challenging as coping with illness, as he struggles with guilt about receiving special treatment and anxiety about the fate of his fellow patients who remain seriously ill. The approach of dawn brings the sound of the bell for lauds, reminding you that the monastery's normal rhythm of prayer continues even as the infirmary operates according to its own urgent schedule. The distant chanting of 300 voices performing the morning prayer creates a backdrop of spiritual continuity that connects the intimate drama of the infirmary with the larger life of the monastic community. The contrast between the communal worship occurring in the church and the individual struggles playing out in the ward illustrates the multiple dimensions of monastic spirituality, which encompasses both public liturgy and private acts of mercy. Brother Anselm's death occurs during the singing of lauds, his final breath coinciding with the community's chanting of the psalm that proclaims, Into your hands I commend my. The timing seems more than coincidental to your medieval understanding of divine providence, which sees meaning and purpose in even the smallest details of life and death. His peaceful expression suggests that he has achieved the kind of holy death that medieval monasticism considers the ultimate goal of spiritual preparation. A state of grace while surrounded by the prayers and care of his monastic brothers. The immediate aftermath of Brother Anselm's death requires a complex choreography of medical, administrative, and spiritual responsibilities that must be coordinated despite your exhaustion and emotional response to the loss. The body must be prepared according to monastic traditions for burial. The abbot and other monastery officials must be notified, and arrangements must be made for the funeral rites that will celebrate his life and commend his soul to divine mercy at the same time. Your remaining patients still require care and attention, creating a situation where grief must be balanced with ongoing medical responsibilities. Brother Vincent's response to Brother Anselm's death provides the most profound indication of his own psychological healing. Rather than retreating into the depression that has characterized his recent condition, he takes initiative in helping prepare the body and organizing the practical arrangements that death requires. His calm efficiency and spiritual maturity during this crisis suggests that his depression has been transformed into a deeper understanding of life's fundamental challenges and his own capacity to meet them with faith and courage. The experience of caring for Brother Anselm during his final hours has provided Vincent with the kind of spiritual breakthrough that medieval monasticism recognizes as one of the potential benefits of serving others in their times of greatest need. The medical lessons learned during the night shift extend far beyond the specific treatments applied to individual patients. Your experience with Brother Thomas's infected wound has revealed new insights about the relationship between fever and healing, while Brother Gregory's response to pulmonary treatments has added to your understanding of respiratory diseases. Even Brother Anselm's peaceful death has provided valuable observations about the dying process that will inform future end-of-life care. These accumulated insights become part of the monastery's medical knowledge, contributing to the slow but steady advancement of healthcare that characterizes medieval monastic institutions. The spiritual education that occurs during night shift care in the infirmary rivals anything achieved through formal theological study or contemplative prayer. The direct encounter with suffering, healing, and death provides concrete experiences of divine grace. Working through natural processes and human intervention, the questions raised by varying outcomes. Why Brother Anselm died while Brother Thomas recovered? Why Brother Vincent's depression lifted through service while Brother Paul's physical healing followed a more predictable course provide material for theological reflection that no amount of abstract study could equal. The sunrise that gradually illuminates the infirmary windows brings both relief and transformation to the small community that has endured the night's trials together. The warm light streaming through the glass creates a sense of renewal and hope that seems to bless the survivors while also honoring the memory of Brother Anselm's peaceful passage. The contrast between the darkness in which most of the night's drama unfolded and the growing brightness of dawn provides a powerful metaphor for the spiritual journey that each patient has experienced in his own way. Brother Thomas's response to the morning light reveals the psychological impact of surviving a near-death experience. His gratitude for recovery is mixed with awareness of how close he came to following Brother Anselm into death, creating a heightened appreciation for life that will likely influence his approach to monastic spirituality for years to come. The experience has aged him in ways that go beyond his physical ordeal, providing him with insights about mortality and grace that typically come only to much older monks, who have had years to contemplate such mysteries. Brother Gregory's stabilization through the night represents a different kind of spiritual achievement. His peaceful acceptance of his condition, combined with his concern for his fellow patients, demonstrates the kind of spiritual maturity that medieval monasticism considers one of the highest forms of religious accomplishment. His tuberculosis will likely claim his life eventually, but his behavior during the crisis has shown that he has achieved the kind of detachment from worldly concerns and attachment to divine will that represents the goal of monastic formation. The documentation of the night's events that you complete as dawn breaks serves multiple purposes within the monastery's institutional memory. Your detailed medical notes will inform future treatment decisions and contribute to the accumulated knowledge that makes the infirmary an increasingly effective center of healing. But your observations about each patient's spiritual response to illness and crisis will also become part of the monastery's spiritual heritage, providing examples of faith under trial that will inspire and instruct future generations of monks facing their own challenges with suffering and mortality. The arrival of the day shift infirmarian creates an opportunity for reflection on the unique form of monastic service that night shift care represents. Your replacement, Brother Francis, brings fresh energy and perspective to the ongoing treatment of the surviving patients, but he also provides an audience for sharing the lessons learned during the long hours of darkness. The transition between shifts becomes a form of spiritual conference, where medical knowledge and theological insight are shared, creating continuity of care that extends beyond individual practitioners to encompass the entire monastic community's commitment to healing. The psychological adjustment to the end of your night shift involves processing experiences that have pushed you beyond normal human limits while also preparing to resume your regular monastic duties. The intensity of caring for 5 critically ill patients, witnessing 1 death and several recoveries, and navigating complex medical and spiritual decisions has created a heightened state of consciousness that must somehow be integrated with the routine demands of community life. The transition requires a form of spiritual reorientation that acknowledges the profound nature of what has occurred while also accepting the need to return to ordinary activities. Your participation in the morning prayer service of Prime takes on special significance after the night's experiences. The familiar Latin phrases about divine mercy and human frailty resonate with new depth and meaning, while the communal nature of the worship provides a sense of connection with brothers who have shared your vigil through their prayers. Even though they were not physically present in the infirmary, the liturgy becomes a way of offering the night's experiences to divine providence, acknowledging that both the suffering and the healing that occurred were part of a larger spiritual reality that transcends individual understanding. The community's response to news of Brother Anselm's death and the other patients' conditions reveals the complex network of relationships and responsibilities that bind the monastery together. His loss is mourned by the entire community, but his peaceful death is also celebrated as evidence of a life well lived and a soul properly prepared for eternal judgment. The news of Brother Thomas's recovery and Brother Vincent's improvement provides cause for gratitude and renewed commitment to the mutual care that characterizes monastic community life. The funeral preparations for Brother Anselm that begin immediately after Prime create a different but equally important form of communal service. The monastery's approach to death emphasizes both grief for the loss of a beloved brother and joy for his liberation from earthly suffering. The rituals of washing the body, clothing it in the best habit, and arranging it in the church for the funeral mass provide opportunities for the community to process their loss while also celebrating the spiritual achievement that a holy death represents. The long-term impact of your night shift experience extends far beyond the immediate medical outcomes to encompass fundamental questions about the nature of monastic vocation and the relationship between service and spirituality. The experience has provided concrete demonstration that the monastery's commitment to caring for its sick members requires not just medical knowledge, but also spiritual courage, emotional resilience, and the kind of selfless dedication that represents the highest ideals of religious life. The night has served as a laboratory for testing and refining the virtues that monasticism seeks to cultivate. The medical knowledge gained during the night will influence your approach to infirmary care for years to come. The observations about fever patterns, the effectiveness of various herbal treatments, and the psychological factors that influence recovery will become part of your professional expertise, but more importantly, the experience has deepened your understanding of the relationship between physical healing and spiritual growth, reinforcing medieval monasticism's conviction that true healthcare must address both body and soul. The spiritual insights achieved during the night shift cannot be easily summarized or categorized because they involve direct encounter with mysteries that transcend rational analysis. The experience of witnessing Brother Anselm's peaceful death, Brother Vincent's psychological transformation, and Brother Thomas's unexpected recovery has provided glimpses into the workings of divine providence that no amount of theological study could have revealed. The night has become a form of mystical experience that will influence your spiritual development for the rest of your monastic life, as you finally retire to your cell for a few hours of rest before resuming your regular duties. You carry with you the accumulated weight and wisdom of a night that has tested every aspect of your monastic formation. The experience has revealed both your limitations and your capabilities, both the challenges and the rewards of the life you have chosen. The infirmary night shift has served as a comprehensive examination of your medical skills, spiritual maturity, and personal dedication to the monastic ideal of serving others. Regardless of personal cost, the sleep that finally comes is not the simple rest of physical exhaustion, but the profound repose that follows spiritual achievement. You have successfully navigated one of the most challenging assignments that monastic life can offer, demonstrating that the years of prayer, study, and discipline have prepared you to meet even the most demanding tests of faith and skill. The night in the infirmary has confirmed your vocation while also revealing new dimensions of service that will continue to challenge and inspire you throughout your monastic career. But even as you rest, you know that future nights will bring new patience, new crises, new opportunities to serve suffering brothers who depend on your medical knowledge and spiritual support. The infirmary operates according to rhythms that ignore human convenience, demanding constant readiness to respond to illness, injury, and death. Your successful completion of this night shift has prepared you for future challenges, while also demonstrating that the monastic life, properly lived, provides both the skills and the spiritual resources necessary to meet whatever trials may come. The dawn breaking over Monte Cassino illuminates not just the end of a difficult night, but the beginning of a deeper understanding of what it means to live as a monk in a world where suffering and healing, death and recovery, despair and hope intersect in ways that reveal the profound mysteries of human existence and divine grace. The endless watch continues, but you now know that you are capable of maintaining the vigil that love demands, regardless of personal cost or comfort.